The
I'm afraid
fluorescent
I
lights
must
of the
cut this
pharmacy
short. I
hummed
don't feel
overhead,
well.
Get him some
casting
help!
everything
Doctor!
in that particular shade of
Sir,
institutional
look at
white
me, I'm coming.
that made Sophie Carter feel like she was
I
already
never
living
thought
in a
I'd find this
hospital.
kind of
Her
happiness
fingers
again.
trembled as she counted the crumpled bills one more
You
time.
truly are my second chance.
$18.63. The prescription in her hand cost $65.47. The cashier, a woman perhaps in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen this scene too many times before, looked away, gave Sophie a moment of privacy for her shame. That small mercy somehow made it worse. Sophie's phone was already in her hand before she realized she was calling. The manager at the diner picked up on the third ring. His voice carried the weight of a man tired of being asked for favors. Could she get an advance on next week's pay? Just $50. She would work extra shifts. She would cover anyone who called in sick. She would do whatever he needed. The answer was no. Policy was policy. He was sorry. Sophie thanked him anyway. Muscle memory. Always be polite. Always say thank you. Even when your world is crumbling and your mother is home without pain medication, and you are standing in a CVS at 9:45 on a Tuesday night, realizing that being a good person does not actually protect you from anything. She put the prescription back on the counter, told the pharmacist she would return tomorrow. Maybe. The lie tasted bitter. They both knew she would not be back, could not be back, not unless something changed. The automatic doors breathed cold October air across her face as she stepped into the parking lot. Austin, Texas had a particular quality to its autumn nights. Not quite cold enough for a jacket, but no longer warm enough to feel comfortable in just the thin sweater she wore. The kind of temperature that existed in between states. Like her life, no longer the student she had been, not yet the nurse she dreamed of becoming. Just suspended in this awful middle place, where every day felt like drowning in slow motion. Her car, a 2008 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and an engine that made concerning noises when she pushed past 55, sat under a streetlight. She had parked there deliberately. Safer. The things you learn when you are a young woman alone in the world. Always park under lights. Always check the back seat before getting in. Always have your keys ready. All these small calculations of survival that men never have to make. The hospital was only 6 blocks away. She could see it from here, rising against the night sky like some massive ship. Her mother was on the 4th floor, room 412. Eleanor Carter, age 54, stage 3 ovarian cancer. Insurance that covered almost nothing of what she actually needed. Sophie did not go there tonight. Could not face walking those halls without the medication Eleanor needed. Could not bear to see the hope in her mother's eyes when she walked in, only to watch it die when Sophie had to explain. Again, that they were out of options. Again, that she had tried. Again, that trying was not enough. Instead, she drove to the one place in Austin that stayed open all night and asked no questions. A small chapel attached to St. David's Medical Center. Not the hospital where her mother was. A different one, smaller, older. The kind of place that existed in the gaps between the modern medical complex. A relic from a time when prayer was offered alongside treatment. 3 o'clock in the morning found Sophie Carter sitting in the back pew of that chapel, hands folded in her lap, not praying. She had stopped praying when her grandmother died 10 years ago. Stopped believing that anyone was listening. Stopped thinking that goodness was rewarded, or that suffering had meaning. But she sat there anyway, because it was quiet and dark and no one would find her here. No one would ask her to be strong or brave or optimistic. She could just be, tired, scared, alone. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket. In that silence, she let herself remember. 6 months ago, before, when her mother had been vibrant and strong, when Eleanor Carter had been the volunteer coordinator at the community center on East 7th Street, the woman who knew everyone's name and always had time to listen, the woman who had raised Sophie alone after her father died when Sophie was 16, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to put Sophie through school, who had never once complained about the sacrifice. The doctor's office had been smaller than Sophie expected. Dr. Sarah Kim, oncologist, had a desk covered in family photos, 3 children, a golden retriever, evidence of a normal life. She had delivered the news in a voice carefully trained to be both honest and gentle. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Aggressive. Treatment needed to start immediately. The survival statistics were not encouraging, but they would fight. They would try everything. Then had come the discussion of cost, the chemotherapy, the surgery, the follow-up care. Numbers so large they stopped having meaning. Sophie had watched her mother's face crumble in real time, watched the strong woman who had held their family together through poverty and grief, and every hard thing finally break. "How will we afford this?" Eleanor had whispered. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll figure it out." Sophie had said it with such confidence, such certainty, as if will alone could manifest $60,000, as if love could be converted into currency. That had been 6 months ago, 6 months of drowning. Sophie had dropped from full-time to part-time at nursing school. Her professors had been understanding but firm. If she could not maintain the clinical hours, she could not continue the program. She had 3 months, maybe 4 if they were lenient. Then she would be expelled. 4 years of work, $40,000 in student loans. All of it would mean nothing. She had picked up shifts at the diner, morning shifts before class, night shifts after. Her body had learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like burned regret. Her hands had learned to smile at customers who left $2 tips on $50 bills. Her heart had learned to stay quiet when her classmates talked about their internships and their futures and their plans. She had sold everything valuable she owned, her laptop, her textbooks, the small diamond earrings her father had given her for her 16th birthday. Each sale had felt like cutting off a piece of herself. But she had done it, because Eleanor needed medication and the rent was due, and the hospital kept sending bills with numbers highlighted in red. The math was simple and terrible. Hospital bills, $48,000 past due, rent, 3 months behind, $2,400, student loans, $35,000, and climbing with interest every month. Tuition for her final semester, $8,500 due in 2 weeks, or she would be dropped from the program. Add it together and you got a number so large, it might as well have been infinity. $274,000. 274,000 reasons why being a good person meant nothing. Why studying hard and working honestly and loving deeply did not protect you from the simple arithmetic of poverty. Sophie had sat at her kitchen table 3 nights ago and spread all the bills out like some kind of horrible deck of cards. Her apartment was cold, the heater had been broken since September, and the landlord kept promising to fix it next week. Next week, always next week. She had wrapped herself in the afghan her grandmother had crocheted and stared at those numbers until they blurred. Her phone had buzzed with a text from Maya, her co-worker at the diner. A woman in her 50s who had survived a divorce and raised 3 kids, and had the kind of weathered wisdom that came from having lived through hard things. The text had simply said, "You okay, honey?" Sophie had not answered. How do you tell someone you are not okay when not okay does not begin to cover the vast emptiness of your situation? That same night, Eleanor had called from the hospital. The cancer had been stable for 3 months, holding steady, but now Dr. Kim needed to see them both. Tomorrow. Important. The word had hung in the air between them like a threat. The meeting had happened yesterday, 24 hours ago, though it felt like a lifetime. Dr. Kim's office again, the same family photos, the same careful, gentle voice. But this time, worse news. The cancer had progressed, faster than they had hoped, more aggressive than the initial scan suggested. They had one option left, an experimental immunotherapy treatment, promising results in clinical trials. Real hope. But the insurance would not cover it. Not experimental, not approved, not their problem. The cost was $180,000. They needed to decide quickly. Begin treatment within 3 months or the window would close. Without it, Eleanor had maybe 6 months, maybe less. Sophie had sat in that office and felt something inside her simply stop, not break. Breaking implied violence, drama, sound. This was quieter, more complete, like a light switching off. She had looked at her mother's face, at the fear there barely contained, and heard herself say, "I'll figure it out." The same words, the same lie, but this time, Eleanor had known, had reached across the sterile space between their chairs and taken Sophie's hand. "Baby, you can't. It's too much." Sophie had not cried, had not argued, had simply squeezed her mother's hand and said, "Let me try." In the bathroom afterward, she had finally broken, had gripped the sides of the sink and stared at her reflection. 22 years old, dark circles under her eyes, hair that needed washing, the face of someone already exhausted by life. "Who am I kidding?" she had whispered to that stranger in the mirror. "I can't save her. I can't even save myself." But she had walked out of that bathroom with her spine straight and her face composed and had driven her mother home and had tucked her into bed like Eleanor used to do for her when Sophie was small and scared of thunderstorms, had whispered, "Everything will be okay." The kind of lie that love requires. Now, sitting in this chapel at 3 in the morning, Sophie let herself consider the things she had not allowed herself to think about, the things people in desperate situations start to consider when all conventional options have failed. She could take out more loans, except no bank would give her credit, not with her debt-to-income ratio. She could start a fundraiser, except those rarely raised real money, and the thought of making her mother's death public entertainment made her sick. She could find a rich relative, except there were none. Could ask friends, except her friends were all as broke as she was, fellow students drowning in their own debt. She could give up, let her mother die, except that some people simply lose this particular lottery. Move on with her life, finish nursing school, build a career, spend the next 50 years knowing she had stood by and let the person she loved most in the world slip away because she could not find a way to save her. That option was not actually an option, which meant she was trapped in an impossible space with no clear path forward and time running out with every heartbeat. Her phone rang at 11:15 that night. She had been walking home from the diner, her feet aching from a double shift, her pockets heavy with tips that might cover groceries. Maybe. The number was unknown. She almost did not answer. The last thing she needed was another debt collector. But something made her pick up. Instinct, desperation, the faint hope that maybe somehow this call would be different. The voice on the other end was male, deep, measured. The kind of voice that belonged to someone accustomed to being listened to. "Miss Carter, this is William Ashford. I'd like to discuss a business proposition that may interest you." Sophie had stopped walking. The street was empty. The kind of empty that Austin gets late at night when even the bars have closed and the city holds its breath before starting over. "I'm sorry, who?" "William Ashford. I have a proposition. One that could solve your current financial difficulties." Her first thought was scam. Had to be. No one called offering solutions to problems they should not even know about. "How do you know about my situation?" "That's not important right now. What's important is that I can help, if you're willing to hear me out." Her second thought was anger. The presumption of it, the arrogance of thinking he could call out of nowhere and she would just listen. "If you're selling something, I'm not interested." "I'm not selling anything, Miss Carter. I'm offering $300,000 in exchange for 1 year of your time." She had stopped breathing. 300,000, enough to cover everything. Eleanor's treatment, the debts, the tuition. Enough to actually save her mother and maybe, just maybe, save herself in the process. What kind of offer? The kind best discussed in person. "Meet me tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car for you." "I don't even know who you are." "Then look me up." His voice had carried something else now, not quite amusement, more like understanding, like he knew exactly what she would do the moment they hung up. "The address will be texted to you. Come alone. Tell no one. What you're about to hear will change everything." The line had gone dead before she could respond. Sophie had stood on that empty street corner for a full minute, phone still pressed to her ear, trying to process what had just happened. Then, because she was her mother's daughter, and had been raised to be careful and smart, she had done exactly what William Ashford predicted. She had Googled him. The results had been extensive. William Ashford, 73 years old, founder and CEO of Ashford Industries. Net worth estimated at $3.2 billion. Oil, real estate, shipping. One of those men who had built an empire from nothing and now existed in a sphere so far removed from normal life that he might as well have been royalty. Widower. Wife Catherine had died 15 years ago. No sons. One daughter, Diana estranged. No scandals. No controversies. Just a reclusive billionaire who apparently spent his time working and not much else. The photo showed a tall man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, distinguished, handsome in the way that wealth and good genetics allow. But there was something in those eyes, even in photographs. A sadness, a distance, like he was looking at the camera but seeing something else entirely. One article from Texas Monthly 5 years ago had included a quote that stuck with her. William Ashford is a man who has everything except what matters most. She had texted Maya, just the basics. Rich guy called, T. Wants to meet, offering money. Should I go? Maya's response had been immediate. Honey, no. Men that rich don't call girls like us unless they want something. Be careful. Could be dangerous. Sophie had known Maya was right. Probably. Almost certainly. But she had also known that $300,000 was enough to save Eleanor's life. And if there was even a chance this was real, she had to take it. She had texted back, I'll be careful, tell you where I'm going. Then she had lain awake in her narrow bed in her cold apartment and tried to imagine what kind of proposition a billionaire could possibly have for a broke nursing student. Nothing good. Nothing that would not cost her something essential. But then, what was more essential than her mother's life? The next evening, she had borrowed Maya's car. Her own Honda was making ominous sounds, and she could not risk it breaking down. The address William had sent was in the hill country, 30 minutes outside Austin. The kind of area where properties measured in acres and privacy was a luxury you could afford. The gates to the estate had been wrought iron, at least 12 feet tall, twisted into elegant patterns that probably cost more than Sophie's entire education. Beyond them, a driveway curved through manicured lawns that looked like something from a magazine. Floodlights illuminated oak trees that had to be over 100 years old. And at the end of that long drive, a house. Except house was too small a word. Mansion, estate, some combination of stone and glass and old money that announced very clearly that the person who lived here existed in a different world. A better one, where problems could be solved with phone calls and money, was a tool rather than an impossible obstacle. Sophie had sat in Maya's car for a full 3 minutes, engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince herself to actually drive forward. This was insane. She should leave, go home, find some other way. Except there was no other way. That was the whole problem. A man in his 60s, wearing what looked like a butler's uniform, had appeared at the gate, opened it with a small remote, gestured for her to drive through, so she had. The circular drive in front of the main entrance was larger than her entire apartment complex. Sophie had parked the battered Civic between a Mercedes and what might have been a Bentley, the contrast so absurd she had almost laughed. Almost. The butler, who introduced himself as Thompson, had led her inside, through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Eleanor's entire medical treatment, past walls lined with oil paintings of stern ancestors, who seemed to judge her for having the audacity to walk on their floors in shoes from Target, down a hallway so long and quiet that her footsteps echoed. Everything about this place screamed wealth. Not new money, not flashy, just old, established, permanent wealth, the kind that had been here for generations and would be here for generations more. The kind that made people like Sophie invisible, except when they were serving coffee or cleaning toilets. Thompson had stopped at a door, knocked once, opened it without waiting for a response. Mr. Ashford, Miss Carter is here. The room beyond was a conservatory. Glass walls on 3 sides, looking out over gardens that seemed to stretch forever. And plants. Orchids primarily. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Every color. Every variety. Blooming in careful rows on custom shelves. Their flowers delicate and alien and beautiful. In the middle of this jungle of cultivated beauty stood William Ashford. He was taller than she expected from the photos. 6'2" or 6'3", still straight back despite his age. He wore dark slacks and a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Reading glasses hung from a chain around his neck. His hair was completely silver, thick, swept back from a face that was weathered but not weak. When he turned to look at her, Sophie felt the full weight of his attention. Those blue eyes were sharp, assessing, not unkind, but not warm either. just watchful, like he was trying to decide if she would be suitable for whatever purpose he had in mind. Miss Carter, his voice was the same as on the phone, deep, controlled. Thank you for coming. Sophie had not known what to say. The whole situation felt surreal, so she had defaulted to honesty. Your message said you had a proposition. I do. But first, would you like something to drink? Water? Tea? I'm fine. She was not fine. She was terrified. But accepting drinks felt like accepting some kind of obligation, and she wanted to keep this businesslike. Understand what she was walking into before she agreed to anything. William had gestured to a chair. She had sat. He had remained standing, moving slowly between the orchids, occasionally touching a leaf or adjusting a pot. The silence stretched. Finally, Sophie had broken it. Why did you ask me here? Because you're in an impossible situation. Your mother is dying. You can't afford her treatment. You're about to lose your education, your apartment, everything you've worked for. And no matter how hard you try, you can't fix it. Am I wrong? The words had hit like physical blows. Accurate, cruel in their accuracy. No, you're not wrong. But how do you know all that? I made inquiries. William had said it casually, like having someone investigated was perfectly normal, like privacy was something he could afford to ignore. I needed to know who you were before I made my offer. And what offer is that? He had turned then, looked at her directly. $300,000. Enough to cover your mother's treatment, your debts, your education, and leave you with something to start over. In exchange, you marry me. The words had hung in the air between them. Marry me. Two words that should have meant one thing, but clearly meant something else entirely. Sophie had stared at him, trying to process. I'm sorry, what? A marriage. Legal. Binding. You would live here. Accompany me to necessary social events. Fulfill the role of my wife in public. In private, we would maintain separate lives. No romantic expectations. No physical obligations. Simply companionship. Sophie's heart had been racing so fast, she thought she might pass out. This is insane. Perhaps. William had moved closer. Not threatening, just present. But it solves your problem. And mine. What problem could you possibly have that requires buying a wife? For the first time, something had flickered in those controlled eyes. Pain, deep and old and carefully buried. Loneliness, Miss Carter. I'm 73 years old. I've been alone for 15 years. My daughter won't speak to me. My friends are business associates who want something from me. Every person in my life sees dollar signs when they look at me. Every person except you. I'm here because you offered me money. How is that different? Because you're honest about it. William had sat finally, in a chair across from hers. You're not pretending to care about me. You're not going to lie and say this is romantic. You need money to save someone you love. That's pure. That's honest. That's why this might actually work. Sophie had tried to think, but her brain felt like it was short-circuiting. You're asking me to sell myself. No. I'm asking you to enter into a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get financial security. I get companionship. Someone who won't manipulate me for more because you're getting what you need up front. This is crazy. I'm 22. You're 73. People will think I'm a gold digger. People will think that regardless. William had leaned back. Question is, do you care more about what strangers think or about saving your mother? That was the question. The only question that mattered. Put like that, there was only one answer. But Sophie had not given it. Not yet. Instead, she had asked, why me? Why not find someone your own age? Someone from your world? Because everyone in my world wants something. Money, status, connection. They would see this as an opportunity for more. You see it as exactly what it is. A transaction. That honesty is rare, valuable. He had stood again, walked to one of the orchids. These require very precise care, he had said, seemingly changing the subject. Too little water, they die. Too much attention, same result. The key is balance, giving them what they need without suffocating them. Is that what you're offering me? Balance? I'm offering you a choice. William had looked at her then, really looked, like he was seeing her as a person rather than a problem to be solved. I'm dying, Miss Carter. Heart condition. 5 years if I'm lucky. Probably less. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I have no one to share even a moment of it with. I'm not looking for love. Had that once. Lost it. But I'd like to not spend my final years completely alone. Sophie had felt something shift. This was not a predator trying to buy a young woman. This was a lonely old man making one last desperate attempt at human connection before death took him. That somehow made it worse, more real, more complicated. I need time to think, she had said. Of course, take 48 hours. William had pulled a card from his pocket, handed it to her. My private number. Call when you've decided. And if I say no? Then you say no. I'll have my people arrange anonymous donations to cover your mother's treatment. No strings, no contact. You'll never hear from me again. That had stopped her. You would do that, even if I refuse? Yes. Why? Because despite what you might think, I'm not actually a monster. Just a man who made you an indecent proposal because he's out of options. If you can't accept, I won't punish you for having better sense than I do. Sophie had stood, moved toward the door, then stopped. If I did say yes, what would you get out of this? Really? William had been quiet for a long moment. The orchids seemed to hold their breath with him. Proof that I'm not just a bank account. That someone can choose to be near me not because of what I have, but because... He had trailed off, looked at the flowers rather than at her. Because maybe I still remember how my wife used to sing while she worked in the garden. And maybe having someone else in this house would make it feel less like a mausoleum. Sophie had left without answering, had driven back to Austin in a daze, had sat in Maya's car outside her apartment building, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Her phone had buzzed with a text from Eleanor. How are you feeling, baby? Hard day? Sophie had stared at those words, at the casual concern from a mother who was dying because her daughter could not find a way to save her, at the love compressed into 10 simple words. She had typed and deleted a dozen responses, finally settled on, I'm okay, Mom, love you. The lie had felt necessary, protective. What else could she say? That she had just been offered $300,000 to marry a 73-year-old billionaire? That she was actually considering it? That the alternative was watching Eleanor die in 6 months? Sophie had not slept that night, had lain in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and run through every possible option, every scenario, every outcome. She could say no, take William's offer of anonymous help, accept charity from a stranger, spend the rest of her life wondering who had saved her mother and why, never knowing if she had made the right choice. She could say yes, marry him, spend 1 year living in that massive house with a lonely old man who wanted nothing more than companionship, save Eleanor, finish school, start her career, pay the price of being called a gold digger for the rest of her life. Or she could say no to everything. Let Eleanor go. Accept that some people just lose, that trying is not always enough, that love cannot cure cancer or create money where none exists. That option was not really an option. Morning had found her red-eyed and exhausted but certain. She had called Maya, asked to borrow her car again, had driven to the hospital. Eleanor had been awake, alert, the kind of good day that happens sometimes between the bad ones. She had smiled when Sophie walked in. That smile that had gotten Sophie through her father's death and every hard moment since. Baby, I didn't expect you this early. Sophie had sat on the edge of the bed, had taken her mother's hand. The skin was thin, papery. When had that happened? Mom, I need to talk to you about something. She had not told Eleanor everything, had edited the story to something more palatable. A man had offered her a job, living companion for an elderly gentleman, good pay, excellent pay, enough to cover everything, but it would mean living at his estate, being available, giving up her independence for a while. Eleanor had seen through it immediately, had squeezed Sophie's hand. This man, is he kind? I think so. Do you feel safe with him? Yes. Then why are you asking my permission? Because you taught me that integrity matters more than money. Eleanor had been quiet. Outside the window, Austin was waking up, the city getting ready for another day of people trying to survive. Finally, her mother had spoken. I also taught you that sometimes survival requires compromise, that doing what you have to do isn't the same as doing something wrong. Mom, I don't want you to think I'm selling myself. Baby, you're trying to save me. That's love, not selling. If this man is offering you a way to do that and you feel safe, then maybe that's grace. Maybe that's the help we've been too proud to ask for. You're not upset? Eleanor had pulled Sophie close, kissed her forehead like she used to when Sophie was small. I'm upset that you have to make this choice. I'm upset that the world is set up so that good people have to sacrifice. But I'm not upset with you. Never with you. Sophie had cried then, great heaving sobs that she had been holding back for 6 months, had let her mother hold her and whisper that everything would be okay. The kind of lie that mothers tell. The kind that daughters need to hear. That afternoon, she had called William Ashford's private number. He had answered on the second ring. I'll do it, she had said, but I have condition. I'm listening. I want my mother's treatment to start immediately, before the wedding. I need to know she's being taken care of. Agreed, I'll make the arrangements today. I want to finish nursing school. That's non-negotiable. Of course, your education is important, and I want an escape clause. 6 months. If either of us is unhappy, we can end this. No penalties, no judgment. There had been a pause. Then, I was going to insist on that myself. I won't trap you, Sophie. This is a choice, not a cage. Then we have a deal. Come tomorrow evening. We'll sign the contracts, make it official. Sophie had hung up and sat very still. She had just agreed to marry a stranger for money, had just sold a year of her life to save her mother, had just crossed a line she never thought she would cross. But Eleanor would live. That was what mattered. Everything else was just details. The next evening, she had returned to the estate. Thompson had led her to William's study this time, a room lined with law books and first editions and all the trappings of old money. William had been sitting behind a massive desk. A lawyer sat beside him. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expression that said she had seen everything. The contract had been 10 pages. Sophie had read every word, every clause, every condition. The lawyer had explained the key points. Marriage would last a minimum of 1 year, could be extended by mutual agreement. Sophie would receive a monthly allowance, $20,000. All debts would be paid immediately. Eleanor's medical care would be covered in full for life, regardless of the marriage status. If the marriage ended after 1 year, Sophie would receive an additional $500,000. If she ended it before 6 months with cause, she would receive nothing, but Eleanor's care would continue. What constitutes cause? Sophie had asked. The lawyer had consulted the document. Infidelity, abuse, violation of the privacy agreement, any attempt to manipulate Mr. Ashford for additional assets beyond what's specified here. Sophie had looked at William. And if you end it? Same rules, he had said quietly. Except you would still receive the $500,000. This contract is designed to protect you, Sophie, not trap you. Not. She had read it again, tried to find the hidden clause, the trap, the thing that would make her regret this. But it had seemed straightforward, almost generous, more than she had expected. The pen had felt heavy in her hand. She had thought of Eleanor, of the scans showing cancer spreading, of Dr. Kim's kind but firm voice explaining that without treatment, 6 months was optimistic. She had thought of her father, dead at 43 from a heart attack, because he had not been able to afford the medication that might have saved him. She had thought of all the ways that being poor in America meant dying of treatable conditions. And she had signed. William had signed below her signature. The lawyer had witnessed. Just like that, Sophie Carter had agreed to become Sophie Ashford, had agreed to trade a year of her freedom for her mother's life. As the ink dried, William had coughed, a sharp, painful sound that made him grip the edge of the desk. Sophie's nursing training had kicked in automatically. She had noticed the slight blue tint to his lips, the tremor in his hands when he reached for water, the careful way he breathed, like someone managing pain. Are you all right? She had asked. Just age, he had said. Nothing to worry about. But Sophie had worried, had seen enough in her clinical rotations to recognize the signs of cardiac distress. How long have you had the tremor in your hands? A few months. William had looked surprised that she noticed. Why? That's not just age. You should see a cardiologist. Soon. I have regular checkups. William had waved it off, but something in his eyes had changed. A hint of respect, maybe even relief. You noticed. I'm a nursing student. It's what I'm trained to do. Catherine used to notice things like that too. His voice had gone soft, distant. She would have liked you. Sophie had not known what to say to that, so she had simply nodded. The lawyer had packed up the contracts. Thompson had appeared with a simple velvet box. Inside, a ring, gold, antique, with a small diamond, simple but beautiful. "My grandmother's," William had said. She would want someone kind to wear it. He had not asked if Sophie wanted to wear it, had simply held it out. An offer, a gesture. Sophie had extended her left hand, had let him slide the ring onto her finger. It had fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, which was impossible. But still, the wedding was scheduled for the following week, Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock, the courthouse downtown. Minimal fuss. Thompson and Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, would serve as witnesses. Sophie could invite her mother if Eleanor was well enough. No one else. Keep it quiet. Keep it simple. Sophie had left that night with a cashier's check for enough money to make her hands shake. The first installment, proof that this was real, that William Ashford was a man of his word. She had gone straight to the hospital, had found Dr. Kim's office, had handed over the check and asked them to begin Eleanor's treatment immediately, as soon as possible, whatever it took. Dr. Kim had stared at the check, had looked at Sophie with questions in her eyes, but she had not asked, had simply nodded. "We'll begin preparation tomorrow. Your mother has a real chance now." Sophie had cried in the hospital parking lot. Great heaving sobs of relief and fear and grief for the life she was leaving behind, for the girl she had been before tonight, the girl who believed that you could get through anything with hard work and good intentions. That girl was gone now. In her place was a woman who had learned that sometimes survival means compromise, that integrity is a luxury you can only afford when you are not watching someone you love die. Thursday arrived faster than Sophie was ready for. The morning was gray, October in Austin threatening rain but not quite delivering. Sophie had borrowed a dress from Maya, white, simple, from Maya's own wedding 30 years ago. It smelled faintly of cedar and old dreams. She had stared at herself in the mirror of her tiny bathroom and tried to recognize the woman looking back. 22 years old, about to marry a 73-year-old billionaire, about to become someone's wife without love, without passion, without any of the things that weddings were supposed to represent. Eleanor had been too weak to attend. The first round of treatment had hit her hard, so it was just Sophie, William, Thompson, and Mrs. Chen. The courthouse ceremony room was small, fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, a bored officiant who had clearly done this hundreds of times and saw nothing unusual about the age difference or the lack of guests or the complete absence of joy. The vows were standard, formulaic. "Do you, Sophie Marie Carter, take this man? Do you, William James Ashford, take this woman? For richer or poorer, in sickness and health." The irony was not lost on Sophie. William was already rich. She was definitely poorer. He was clearly in sickness. She was clinging to health by willpower alone. "I do," she had said when prompted, her voice steadier than she felt. "I do," William had said, his voice careful, controlled. But something flickered in his eyes when he looked at her, something that might have been hope, or might have been fear. She could not tell. The ring from his grandmother slid onto her finger, officially now. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. William did not kiss her. They had not discussed it, and the moment passed without either of them moving to close the distance. Just a handshake, formal, businesslike. Exactly what this was. A single photographer took one photo, for legal purposes, for the record. Sophie tried to smile, failed. William looked solemn. They looked like what they were. Two people entering into a contract, nothing more. The drive to the estate was quiet. Sophie sat in the back of William's car, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire life's earnings, and watched Austin disappear behind them. Watched her old life fade into memory. She had packed a single suitcase. Everything she owned fit into one bag. The contrast between that and the massive estate rising ahead of them was almost funny. Almost. Mrs. Chen was waiting at the entrance. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and capable hands. She had smiled at Sophie, a real smile, warm. "Welcome to your home, Mrs. Ashford. Let me show you to your room." Mrs. Ashford. The name felt foreign, wrong. Sophie wanted to correct her, say that she was still Sophie Carter, still herself. But that would have been a lie. She had signed the papers. taken the name, accepted the ring. She was Mrs. Ashford now, at least for the next year. The bedroom Mrs. Chen led her to was larger than Sophie's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to stretch forever. A canopy bed with silk sheets. Antique furniture that belonged in a museum. Everything perfect. Everything expensive. Everything cold. "This was yours?" Sophie had asked. "Catherine's," Mrs. Chen had said gently. "Mr. Ashford asked me to prepare it for you. He thought you'd like the morning light. It's beautiful." Sophie had meant it, but beauty did not make something feel like home. Mrs. Chen had left her to unpack. Sophie had placed her single suitcase on the bed and opened it. Her clothes looked shabby against the silk bedding. Her shoes worn and cheap. Her toiletries basic. Everything about her screamed that she did not belong here. She had unpacked anyway, hung her few dresses in a closet designed for hundreds, put her books on shelves meant for first editions, claimed this space because it was hers now, whether she belonged or not. That night, dinner was served in a dining room so large her voice would have echoed if she had spoken. William sat at one end of a table that could have seated 20. Sophie sat at the other end, 20 feet of polished wood between them. It was absurd, ridiculous, a perfect metaphor for this entire arrangement. The food was prepared by a chef Sophie never saw, served by staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Filet mignon, roasted vegetables, bread so perfect it had to be made fresh, wine older than Sophie, everything exquisite, everything wasted on two people who could barely see each other across the expanse. Halfway through the meal, Sophie had started laughing, could not help it. The whole situation was too surreal, too bizarre. William had looked up surprised. "Something funny?" "This," Sophie had gestured at the table. At the distance between them, at the absurdity of eating a wedding dinner with her new husband 20 feet away. "We can't even have a conversation like this." William had looked at the table, at the empty chairs between them. Then he had stood, picked up his plate, walked to the seat beside her. "You're right, this is ridiculous." They had finished dinner side by side, close enough to talk without shouting, close enough to feel almost normal. And they had talked, really talked, about books they both loved, Steinbeck, Hemingway, about music, classical piano, about the small things that make up a life. William had told her about growing up poor in Oklahoma, about his father who was a mechanic and his mother who cleaned houses, about working his way through college and building his first company from nothing, about meeting Catherine when he was 35 and she was 28, about how she had seen past his ambition to the man underneath. Sophie had told him about her father, about watching him die too young because they could not afford his medication, about her grandmother who had raised her to believe in kindness, about nursing school, and the dream of helping people who could not help themselves. It was the first real conversation they had had, the first moment that felt like two people connecting rather than two parties negotiating. When William smiled, really smiled, his whole face changed. The severe businessman disappeared. In his place was someone warmer, almost vulnerable. After dinner, William had excused himself to his study, work to catch up on. Always work. Sophie had wandered the halls of her new home, had tried to memorize the layout, the portraits of stern ancestors, the rooms that looked lived in, and the ones that looked like museum exhibits. This house was beautiful, but it was not a home. It was a mausoleum, exactly as William had described it. She had found her way back to her bedroom, had changed into pajamas, had climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were soft, the mattress perfect, but she could not sleep. The silence was too complete, too heavy. Back in her apartment, she had been able to hear neighbors, traffic, life happening around her. Here there was nothing, just vast, expensive quiet. At 2 a.m, Sophie had given up on sleep, had wrapped herself in a robe and wandered. The house was dark except for small lights along the baseboards. She had let her feet carry her without direction, through hallways, past closed doors, down a staircase she had not noticed before. And then she had heard it. Piano music, Chopin, a nocturne, played with such heartbreaking beauty that Sophie had stopped breathing just to hear it better. She had followed the sound to the conservatory, the same room where she had first met William, where the orchids bloomed in careful rows. The glass walls showed only darkness now. But inside, lit by a single lamp, William sat at a grand piano she had not noticed before. His eyes were closed. His hands moved over the keys with the kind of muscle memory that comes from decades of practice. And tears streamed down his face, silent, steady. The tears of a man who had learned to grieve quietly, who had spent 15 years mourning alone. Sophie had stood in the doorway, invisible in the darkness, and watched. Had seen this powerful man reduced to raw grief by music and memory. Had understood in that moment that William Ashford was not the cold billionaire the world saw. He was a man who had loved deeply and lost completely, and had never quite recovered. The music ended. William sat with his hands on the keys, not moving, just breathing. Sophie had backed away quietly, had returned to her room, had climbed into bed with her heart aching for this man she had married. She had taken his name, taken his money, agreed to share his life, but she had not truly understood what she had walked into until that moment. William Ashford was still in love with his dead wife, still grieving 15 years later, still alone in this massive house full of memories. And Sophie had just agreed to haunt those same halls, to be a living ghost among the orchids and the silence and the crushing weight of a love that refused to die. She had finally fallen asleep as dawn broke. Her last thought before unconsciousness took her was simple and terrifying. What have I done? But the answer was clear. She had saved her mother. She had made the only choice she could live with. And now she would live with all the consequences, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do them part. Outside her window, the Texas sun rose over Ashford Estate. Another day beginning, another chapter starting. The year that would change everything had officially begun, whether Sophie Carter Ashford was ready or not. Morning came too early and too bright. Sophie woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The ceiling above her was hand-painted with delicate vines and flowers, not the water-stained drywall of her apartment. The sheets beneath her felt like liquid silk, not the scratchy cotton she was used to. And the silence. God, the silence was so complete it felt like being underwater. She had married William Ashford yesterday. That fact settled over her like a weight, real, irreversible, at least for now. The clock on the nightstand read 6:30. Back in her old life, she would have been rushing to get ready for a morning shift at the diner, would have been calculating whether she had enough gas to make it through the week, would have been checking her phone for messages from bill collectors. Instead, she was lying in a bed worth more than her car, wearing pajamas she had bought at Target 3 years ago, trying to figure out what being Mrs. William Ashford actually meant in practice. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen's voice came through the door, gentle but clear. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford. Breakfast is being served in the morning room in 20 minutes, if you'd like to join Mr. Ashford." Sophie sat up. The title still felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. "Thank you," she called back. "I'll be there." She showered quickly in a bathroom larger than her old bedroom. Marble everywhere, heated floors. A shower with 6 different heads that she could not quite figure out how to operate properly. Everything in this house seemed designed to remind her that she did not belong, that she was playing dress-up in a life that was not hers. But she had agreed to play the part, so she dressed in the nicest of her limited wardrobe. A simple blue dress that Maya had helped her pick out years ago for job interviews, brushed her hair until it looked presentable, put on the grandmother's ring that now marked her as William's wife, took a deep breath, and went to find the morning room. The house looked different in daylight, less intimidating somehow, softer. The morning sun streaming through tall windows made the marble floors glow, made the oil painting seem less judgmental, made everything feel almost possible. Thompson appeared like a ghost, seeming to materialize from nowhere. "Right this way, Mrs. Ashford." He led her through hallways she did not recognize, down a corridor lined with windows overlooking the gardens, to a room she had not seen before. The morning room was smaller than the formal dining room, almost intimate by the standards of this house. Windows on 3 sides, a round table set for 2. And William, already seated, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning." His voice was formal, careful, like he was not quite sure what the rules were either. "Good morning." Sophie took the seat across from him. The table was only 4 feet across, close enough to have an actual conversation. She felt grateful for that small mercy. Coffee appeared at her elbow, poured by a staff member she had not heard approach. Orange juice, a plate of fresh fruit, toast with butter already spread. The casual abundance of it made her throat tight. 6 months ago, she had been skipping meals to save money. Now food appeared without her asking. The whiplash was disorienting. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The awkwardness stretched between them like a physical thing. Finally, Sophie could not take it anymore. "About last night, the piano. I heard you." William's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "I didn't realize anyone was awake. I couldn't sleep. New house, new life, new everything." Sophie kept her voice gentle. "You play beautifully. Catherine taught me." William's face did something complicated. Not quite pain, not quite fondness. Something between. "She was a concert pianist before we married. Could have had a real career. Instead, she married me and played in the conservatory for an audience of orchids." "Do you regret that she gave up her career?" "Every day." William picked up his coffee cup, held it but did not drink. She said she didn't. Said music was for joy, not performance. But I always wondered if she resented me. If in the end, she felt trapped. Sophie thought about that. About sacrifice and choice and the difference between them. "Did you ever ask her?" "No." William finally sipped his coffee. "I was too afraid of the answer." The honesty of it hit Sophie somewhere deep. Here was a man with billions of dollars and all the power that came with it, still afraid of a truth from 15 years ago, still carrying that weight. It made him more human, more real. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie waited until he nodded. "Why did you really marry me? Not the loneliness part. That makes sense. But why this arrangement? Why not just hire a companion? Why make it legal?" William set down his cup, looked at her directly. Those blue eyes were sharp, but not unkind. "Because I'm tired of pretending. My whole life has been performance. Business meetings where everyone wants something. Social events where no one says what they mean. Even my marriage to Catherine, as much as I loved her, required a certain presentation. I wanted something honest. Even if the honesty is that we're doing this for practical reasons." "And you think that's enough? Honesty?" "I think it's a better foundation than most marriages start with." William leaned back slightly. "We're not lying to each other about what this is. That's rare. Valuable." Sophie considered that. He was right in a way. They had no illusions, no false expectations. Just a clear-eyed transaction between two desperate people. It should have felt cold. But sitting here in the morning light, watching this guarded man try to explain himself, it felt almost hopeful. "I have a request," Sophie said. "If we're going to do this honestly, I need things to be different." "Different how?" "We can't eat dinner 20 feet apart. We can't live in the same house and never talk. If you want companionship, actual companionship, we need to act like we're at least friendly, not strangers who signed a contract." William smiled, actually smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less severe. "What did you have in mind?" "Breakfast together, like this. Every morning, just talking. No performance, no pretending. Just two people sharing coffee and being honest about how strange this all is." "I can do that." "And dinner. Same thing. The smaller dining room or wherever. But together. Really together." "Agreed." William paused. "What else?" "If something is bothering you, tell me. If I'm doing something wrong, say so. If you're sick or tired or grieving, don't hide it. That's the deal. Honesty. Even when it's uncomfortable." William extended his hand across the table. "It's a deal, not a contract. Just an agreement between two people trying to figure this out." Sophie shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, real. And for the first time since she had walked into this house, she felt like maybe, possibly, this might actually work. After breakfast, Mrs. Chen found Sophie in the hallway, asked if she had a moment, led her to a part of the house Sophie had not explored yet, up a back staircase, down a corridor that smelled faintly of dust and closed doors. Mrs. Chen stopped at a door at the end of the hall. This was Mrs. Catherine's studio. Mr. Ashford locked it after she passed, never opened it again. but I thought you should see it. Understand what this house used to be. She opened the door. Inside was a room filled with light, windows on two walls, an easel in the corner, canvases stacked against the walls, paint supplies organized on shelves, exactly as they had been left 15 years ago. And everywhere, paintings, bright, joyful, alive, landscapes, portraits, abstract explosions of color. Sophie walked slowly through the room, looking at each piece. The paintings were good, really good. Not amateur work, professional quality, full of movement and emotion and something indefinable that made your chest ache just looking at them. She was talented, Sophie said quietly. Mrs. Chen nodded. She was. But more than that, she was joyful. This house was full of life when she was here. Music, laughter, light. After she died, Mr. Ashford closed off all the parts that reminded him of her, including himself. What happened? How did she die? Stroke. Sudden. She was only 43. Mrs. Chen's voice was steady but sad. Mr. Ashford was in Singapore closing a deal. By the time he flew back, she was gone. He's never forgiven himself for not being here. That's not his fault. No. But grief doesn't care about logic. Mrs. Chen touched one of the canvases gently. Miss Diana had just turned 33, was building her law practice in New York. She flew back immediately, but it was too late. Blamed her father for everything, for working too much, for not being there, for caring more about business than family. They haven't spoken properly in years. Sophie felt the weight of that. Diana had been an established adult when her mother died, old enough to understand the complexity, but young enough for the wound to cut deep. Was she close with her mother? Very. Catherine was so proud of Diana, proud she had built her own career, become independent, strong. Mrs. Chen's eyes were distant with memory. That made the loss harder. Diana lost her mother and her best friend. And she lost her father too, in a way. He disappeared into grief and work, left her alone with hers. Sophie thought about William at the piano, about the tears, about the man trying so hard to maintain control while falling apart inside. Does he know you're showing me this? No. But I think you need to see it. Understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a lonely man's house. It's a mausoleum. And you're the first living thing to walk these halls in 15 years. That's a lot of weight to carry. I'm not trying to replace her. Mrs. Chen smiled. I know, but he needs to remember what it feels like to have someone care. Not about his money. Not about what he can provide, just care. About him, as a person. Think you can do that? Sophie looked around the studio, at the evidence of a vibrant life cut short, at the joy frozen in paint and canvas, at the ghost of a woman who had loved this difficult man. I can try. That's all any of us can do. Mrs. Chen closed the door gently as they left. One more thing, Mr. Ashford has a doctor's appointment this afternoon. Cardiologist. First time in 2 years. He made it because you asked. That means something. The words settled in Sophie's chest. Warm. Significant. She had been here less than 2 days, and she had already changed something. Made William take care of himself. It was small, but it mattered. Her phone rang as she walked back to her room. Eleanor. Sophie answered immediately. Mom, how are you feeling? Baby. Eleanor's voice was stronger than it had been in months, clearer. The doctor started the treatment, the new protocol. They say it's working already. The markers are down. Sophie sat down hard on the nearest chair. Already? It's only been a week. I know. Dr. Kim says I'm responding better than expected. She thinks I have a real chance. Eleanor's voice broke. Crying, but happy crying. Because of you. Because of what you did. Mom. Sophie was crying too. Don't, I couldn't lose you. I know, baby, and I know what this cost you, this arrangement, this sacrifice. But I want you to know something. I'm going to fight, I'm going to beat this, so that your sacrifice means something, so that it's worth it. It's already worth it, just hearing your voice like this, strong. That's worth everything. They talked for another 20 minutes, about the treatment, about the hospital, about nothing important and everything important. When Sophie hung up, she sat in the hallway and let herself cry properly. Relief, joy, fear, gratitude, all of it mixing together, until she could not tell which emotion was which. This was why she had done it, this moment, her mother's voice full of hope instead of resignation. If she had to spend a year in this strange house with this complicated man, it was worth it, would always be worth it. 3 days later, William asked if she would like to go somewhere. Get out of the house, escape the estate for a few hours. He had something he wanted to show her. They drove in his Mercedes, William at the wheel. He drove carefully, the way older people drive when they have learned that speed is not worth the risk. Sophie watched the hill country slide past the windows, oak trees and limestone cliffs, wildflowers starting to bloom despite the late season. Texas had a particular beauty in autumn, subtle, easy to miss if you were not paying attention. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see." 20 minutes later, they pulled into a parking lot Sophie recognized, the Botanical Gardens on the south side of Austin. She had been here once, years ago, on a school field trip, remembered thinking it was the most peaceful place she had ever been. William bought 2 tickets from a bored teenager at the entrance, led Sophie down winding paths through sections devoted to different ecosystems, desert plants, tropical flowers, native Texas species. He walked slowly, pointing things out, naming plants like old friends. They ended up in a rose garden, dozens of varieties in careful rows, some still blooming despite the season. And in the center, a small memorial garden, stone benches, a fountain, plaques with names and dates. William stopped at one bench, sat down heavily. Sophie sat beside him. She did not need to read the plaque to know whose name was on it. Catherine's. "I come here once a month," William said quietly. "Talk to her. Tell her about the business, about Diana, about my failures. It probably sounds crazy. It sounds like love." He glanced at her, surprised. Most people would say it's pathetic. A grown man talking to a piece of stone. Love doesn't stop being love just because the person is gone. Sophie had learned that when her father died. The love doesn't go anywhere. It just has to find new ways to exist. William was quiet for a long moment. Then, "She would have liked you, Catherine. She always said I needed someone who would call me on my nonsense, someone who wouldn't let me hide behind work and money." What was she like? Alive. William's voice went soft. "That's the best word. She made everything feel more real, more immediate. I was so focused on building the business, on proving I was more than my background. She reminded me to actually live while I was busy achieving." "Do you regret it, working so much?" "Every day." William looked at the plaque. "I have billions of dollars and a company that will outlive me. But I missed her graduation from Juilliard, missed our anniversary 3 years in a row, missed the last week of her life because I was in Singapore. So yes, I regret it. More than I can say." Sophie wanted to say something comforting, found no words adequate, so she just sat beside him in the garden and let him have his grief. Sometimes presence was enough. They sat there for maybe 20 minutes, watching the fountain, listening to birds, existing in the peaceful silence of a place devoted to memory. And then a voice cut through that peace like a knife. "Dad?" William turned, went very still. Sophie followed his gaze to see a woman standing on the path, late 40s, elegant in an expensive pantsuit, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that were unmistakably William's eyes in a different face. "Diana." William stood slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement would make her disappear. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing." Diana's voice was cold, but her eyes were uncertain, flickering between William and Sophie, then back. "Is this her, the wife I heard about?" Sophie stood, extended her hand. "I'm Sophie." Diana looked at Sophie's hand like it might bite, did not shake it. "So you're the latest development, the new project." The words were designed to wound. Sophie felt them hit, but she kept her voice level. "I'm the daughter who means everything to him. That's what he told me, before I ever met you." Diana's expression cracked, just for a second, then reformed into cool distance. "He told you that? He keeps childhood drawings of yours in his study, your mother's paintings in the conservatory. He plays piano at 2 in the morning because he misses the sound of her music, and he comes here once a month to talk to her memory because he doesn't know how else to deal with the grief." Sophie kept her voice gentle, factual. "So yes, I know you mean everything to him, whether you believe it or not." Diana stared at her, really looked, then turned to William. Can we talk? Alone? William glanced at Sophie. She nodded, walked away to give them privacy, found another bench on the far side of the garden, and sat down to wait. 15 minutes passed. 20. Sophie watched other visitors wander through, couples holding hands, families with small children, an elderly man in a wheelchair being pushed by what might have been his daughter. All these little tableaus of normal life, the kind of life she might have had if circumstances had been different. When William finally returned, he looked shaken, sat down beside her heavily. His hands were trembling slightly. Sophie reached out, took his hand without thinking, squeezed. "Are you okay?" she asked. She spoke to me. William's voice was rough. "First real conversation in 5 years. Because of you. Because you told her I keep her drawings. I just told her the truth. The truth matters." He squeezed her hand back. "She wants to have dinner. This weekend. At the estate. Both of us." "That's good. That's a start. I don't know how to do this. How to be a father again after so long." "You just show up." Sophie said it simply, the way Mrs. Chen had said it to her. "Show up and be honest. That's all anyone can ask. What if it's too late? What if I've damaged things too badly? Then you try anyway. And maybe it doesn't fix everything. But it's still better than silence." William looked at their joined hands. "When did you become so wise?" Sophie laughed, a real laugh. "I'm 22 and married a stranger for money. I'm the opposite of wise. And yet here we are." William smiled, small but real. "And I'm grateful." They sat in the garden for another hour, talking about nothing important, about everything important, about Diana's childhood, about Catherine's garden, about the strange path that had brought them both here. And somewhere in that conversation, something shifted. They were not strangers anymore. Not quite friends, but something. Companions. Partners in this strange arrangement. Two people learning to exist in the same space. The dinner with Diana was scheduled for Sunday evening. Mrs. Chen prepared the meal herself. Roasted chicken, vegetables from the garden, apple pie, comfort food. The kind meant to ease tension rather than impress. Diana arrived exactly on time, dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than Sophie's entire wardrobe, but were clearly an effort to seem relaxed. She shook Sophie's hand this time, stiff but civil. "Thank you for having me." "Of course." Sophie kept her voice warm. "Your father is excited you're here." Dinner was awkward at first. Conversation stilted. Long silences broken by comments about the food or the weather or other safe topics. But slowly, carefully, things began to thaw. Mrs. Chen appeared with photo albums, pictures of young Diana, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Catherine in all of them, vibrant, present, alive. I remember this. Diana touched a photo of herself at maybe 7, covered in finger paint. "Mom let me paint on the conservatory windows." "You were so mad." She looked at William, said it would stain the glass. It did stain the glass. William's voice was soft. "We had to replace 3 panels. But Catherine said creativity was more important than perfection." "I forgot that part." Diana kept looking at the photos, seeing memories she had buried under anger. "We used to have fun, didn't we? Before I forgot how to be present." William set down his fork. "Diana, I need to say something. I was a terrible father. I put work first. Always. I missed your childhood chasing success I didn't need. I wasn't there when your mother died. I failed you both. And I'm sorry. It doesn't fix anything. But you deserve to hear it." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "Why couldn't you have said that 5 years ago? 10 years ago?" "Because I didn't know how. Because I was proud and stupid and afraid." William's voice broke. "I'm still afraid. But Sophie taught me something. She taught me that showing up imperfectly is better than not showing up at all." Diana looked at Sophie. "You really care about him. This isn't just an arrangement." Sophie met her eyes. "Honest. I came here for practical reasons. I won't lie about that. But yes, I care about him. He's a good man who's been hurt badly, and he's trying to be better. That matters. Mom would have liked you." Diana wiped her eyes. She always said Dad needed someone stubborn enough to make him see himself clearly. "Then I hope I can live up to that." They talked until late. Not a perfect reconciliation. There were still wounds too deep to heal in one night. But it was a start. Diana agreed to come back. to try, to build something new from the broken pieces. When she left, she hugged William. Brief, awkward, but real. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trying." After Diana was gone, William sat in the library. Sophie found him there an hour later, staring at nothing, processing. "You okay?" she asked. "I have my daughter back, because of you." William looked at her, really looked. "How do I ever repay that?" "You don't." Sophie sat across from him. "That's not how this works. We help each other." "That's the point." The charity gala was scheduled for the following Saturday, a major event benefiting children's literacy programs. 400 guests, black tie, the kind of thing where the Austin social elite would gather to write checks and judge each other. Sophie was terrified. A stylist arrived 3 days before, a woman named Karen who looked at Sophie like she was a challenge rather than a person, took measurements, asked questions about preferences, showed up the next day with options. The dress they settled on was midnight blue, simple lines, elegant, the kind of thing that would not scream trying too hard but also would not make her look cheap. The shoes were painful but necessary. The jewelry was borrowed from William's vault, diamonds that probably cost more than a house. Maya came over the afternoon of the gala to help with makeup and hair, took one look at the dress and whistled. "Honey, you clean up nice." "I feel like I'm playing dress up." "Then fake it. That's what rich people do anyway. They're all just pretending to belong. You'll fit right in." But Sophie did not feel like she would fit in. Felt like everyone would see through her immediately. See the diner waitress in an expensive dress. See the poor girl who married for money. See the fraud. When William saw her, he stopped, just stared for a long moment. Then, "You look beautiful." I looked terrified. "That too, but also beautiful." He offered his arm. "And remember, you don't have to prove anything to these people. Just survive the evening, that's enough." The ballroom at the downtown Hilton was massive. Chandeliers, round tables with white linens, flower arrangements that probably cost what Sophie used to make in a month. And people. So many people. All of them wealthy, all of them confident, all of them looking at Sophie and William with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Whispers followed them like a wake, not even subtle. "She's so young. Where did he find her? How much do you think he's paying her? Think it'll last 6 months?" Sophie kept her spine straight, her face pleasant, let William guide her through the crowd, shook hands, made small talk, pretended not to hear the comments. At their assigned table, she was seated between William and a woman named Cassandra Bennett, mid-60s, perfectly styled blonde hair, smile like a shark. Across from her was Victoria Chase, Marcus's wife, the nephew who had been angling for William's position. Victoria's expression made it clear she considered Sophie an enemy. Dinner was served. Sophie focused on her food, on not using the wrong fork, on breathing. Then Cassandra struck. "So Sophie, dear, what exactly do you do? Besides being Mrs. Ashford, of course." Sophie set down her fork carefully. "I'm finishing nursing school, and I work at a diner when I can. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work and I'm proud of it." "How refreshing." Cassandra's tone made it clear she found it anything but refreshing. "To have someone so grounded at our table." Victoria leaned forward. "I'm sure you're quite skilled at serving. You must feel right at home around all this food." The insult was clear. Sophie felt heat rising in her face, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I do, actually. I understand what it takes to earn a living. What real work looks like, that's something I'm grateful for." An older man at the end of the table chuckled. "Richard Thornton, board member, old friend of William's. She's got spine. I like her." The tension broke slightly, but Sophie knew the night was far from over. Midway through dinner, William was called to the podium. He stood, gave Sophie's hand a quick squeeze, then walked to the front of the room to give remarks. The speech was polished, professional, talking about literacy rates and funding needs and community impact. And then, mid-sentence, he stumbled, gripped the podium. His face went pale. Sophie was on her feet before she thought about it, pushing through tables, reaching him in seconds, her nursing training overriding everything else. She took his arm, checked his pulse, steady but elevated, his breathing shallow. "Look at me," she said quietly. "Just breathe, slow and steady." The room had gone silent, everyone staring. Someone shouted for a doctor. Sophie ignored them, focused on William, on keeping him calm, on assessing whether this was a true emergency or just a moment of weakness. His color returned slightly. His breathing evened. He looked at her, steady now, grounded by her presence. "I'm okay," he whispered. "Just needed a moment." Sophie helped him off the stage, ignored the gasps and whispers, got him to a quiet corner. Paramedics arrived. Sophie explained the situation, his history, the cardiac issues. They wanted to take him to the hospital. William refused, said he just needed rest, had overdone it. Sophie insisted on calling his personal physician. Dr. Torres arrived within 20 minutes, examined William in a private room the hotel provided. The diagnosis was stress-induced, not a heart attack, but a warning. William needed to slow down, take his medications properly, stop pushing himself so hard. Sophie did not leave his side through any of it, held his hand while the doctor lectured, helped him to the car, rode home in silence. Back at the estate, she helped him to his room, made sure he took his medication, brought him water, sat on the edge of his bed like a nurse with a patient. "I'm sorry," William said, "for ruining the evening." "You didn't ruin anything. You scared me. That's different." "I scared myself." He looked old suddenly, fragile, the invincible businessman facade completely gone. "I forget sometimes that I'm not 30 anymore, that my body has limits. Then maybe it's time to start remembering." Sophie's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't keep pretending you're fine when you're not." "I'll try." "Good. Because I'm not watching another person I care about ignore their health until it's too late." The words hung in the air. Another person I care about. Sophie had not meant to say it, had not realized it was true until the words were out. But there it was. She cared about him. Not because of the contract, not because of what he provided, but because of who he was. This stubborn, lonely, complicated man who was trying so hard to be better. William's hand found hers, squeezed. "Thank you. For tonight. For everything." Sophie squeezed back, then stood. "Get some sleep. I'll check on you in the morning." But sleep was impossible for Sophie. She lay in her bed in the room down the hall and replayed the evening, the whispers, the judgment, the moment of watching William collapse and feeling her heart stop, the realization that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, this had become real. At midnight, she gave up, wrapped herself in a robe, wandered the house, found herself in the library, and found William there too, reading, unable to sleep either. "Couldn't rest?" she asked. "Too much in my head." He set down his book. "You?" "Same." She sat in the chair across from him, the one that was becoming hers. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just existing together. Then William spoke. "Sophie, I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "Okay. This arrangement, it's becoming something else for me." He set down his book, met her eyes directly. "I wake up hoping you'll join me for breakfast. I find myself listening for your voice in the halls. I play piano hoping you'll hear. I'm falling for you. And I have no right to. You're 22, I'm 73. We have a contract. But I needed you to know the truth." Sophie's breath caught, the words she had been afraid to hear, because once they were spoken, everything changed. "William, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for reciprocation. I just needed to be honest. We promised each other honesty." "I need time." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "I need to figure out what I'm feeling. If it's real or just gratitude or confusion or loneliness. I can't give you an answer when I don't know myself." "Then take time." William's voice was steady, kind. "I can wait. Or I can let it go. Whatever you need. Can we just go back to how we were before you said anything?" "We can try." "But Sophie," his eyes were sad, knowing, you can't unknow someone's heart. He was right. They both knew it. Something had shifted. The carefully maintained distance had collapsed, and Sophie did not know how to rebuild it, did not know if she wanted to. She went back to her room, lay awake until dawn, her mind racing, her heart confused. She had come here for her mother, for survival, for practical, clear reasons. But somewhere along the way, she had started to care, had started to see William as more than a transaction, had started to feel things she had promised herself she would not feel. And that terrified her, because William was dying, 5 years maximum, maybe less. And if she let herself love him, she would have to watch him die, would have to endure that loss. Add it to the collection of losses she already carried. But was protecting her heart worth the cost of missing something real? Something honest and unexpected and possibly beautiful? Sophie did not have an answer. Not yet. But she knew one thing. The year that was supposed to be simple had become impossibly complicated, and there was no going back to before, only forward, into whatever came next. In the morning, breakfast was awkward. William reading his paper, Sophie drinking coffee in silence, neither knowing what to say, how to bridge the gap that honesty had created. Mrs. Chen watched them from the doorway, shook her head sadly. Love was never simple, but it was always worth it. She had learned that the hard way, had watched Catherine and William build something beautiful despite the difficulties, had watched it end too soon. Now she was watching history repeat itself. Another unlikely love, another impossible situation, another chance for these two broken people to find something whole. Whether they were brave enough to take it remained to be seen. But Mrs. Chen had hope, because Sophie Carter Ashford was stubborn, and William James Ashford was learning, finally, after 73 years, how to put his heart before his fear. The question was whether it would be enough, whether love could bloom in the space between a contract and a choice, whether two people from different worlds could build something real from a foundation of desperation. Only time would tell, and time, as William knew too well, was the one thing he did not have in abundance. But for now, in this moment, they had breakfast, and honesty, and the tentative beginning of something that might possibly become more, if they were brave enough to let it. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Sophie with its ease. Mornings meant coffee in the morning room, William reading the business section, Sophie studying nursing textbooks she had brought from her apartment. They talked about small things, the weather, the orchids, the news, nothing profound. But the conversation itself was profound. The act of two people choosing to share space, choosing to be present. Eleanor visited on Wednesday. Sophie had arranged for a car to bring her from the hospital. William met her at the door, formal but kind, offered his hand. "Mrs. Carter, it's an honor to finally meet you properly." Eleanor took his hand, studied his face with a mother's protective gaze. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for what you've done, for my daughter, for me. You raised an extraordinary woman. That's worth everything." The three of them had lunch in the conservatory, surrounded by orchids and light. Eleanor asked William about his business, about his life. Not invasive questions, just curiosity, getting to know the man her daughter had married. William answered honestly, talked about building the company, about Catherine, about the mistakes he had made and the things he was learning. Sophie watched them, her mother and her husband, two people from completely different worlds finding common ground. It felt important, like a blessing she had not known she needed. After Eleanor left, William found Sophie in the library, sat beside her on the sofa. "Your mother is remarkable." "She is." Sophie closed her textbook. "She likes you, I can tell." "I'm glad." William hesitated, then, "I know this situation is strange, unconventional, but I want you to know something. I respect you, your choices, your strength. I don't want you to ever feel like you're just—" He struggled for words. "Just an arrangement." Sophie looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes. "I don't feel that way. Not anymore. I did at first, but you've shown me who you are. And I respect that, respect you." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only happens when people are truly at ease with each other. Outside the windows, the gardens glowed in afternoon light. Inside, two people who had started as strangers were slowly becoming something more. That evening, Diana called, asked if she could visit again on Friday. Bring Sarah this time. Her girlfriend. William said yes immediately, hung up the phone looking lighter, hopeful. "She wants me to meet Sarah," he said to Sophie. He shook his head. "That's huge." "It is." Sophie smiled. "She's letting you into her life, really into it. I don't want to mess this up." "Then just be yourself. Be present. Be the father she needs now, not the one you think you should have been." Friday arrived. Diana and Sarah showed up with a bottle of wine and a store-bought pie. Sarah was warm, funny, an architect with a sharp mind and kind eyes. She put everyone at ease immediately, told stories about the brownstone renovation that had Diana laughing and shaking her head. Over dinner, Sarah turned to William. Diana talks about you sometimes, about how you used to take her to construction sites when she was little. Let her wear a hard hat. William blinked, surprised. I didn't think she remembered that. I remember everything, Diana said quietly. The good and the bad. I chose to focus on the bad for a long time. But, she looked at Sophie. But someone reminded me that people can change, that showing up matters. After they left, William stood at the window watching their car disappear down the drive. Sophie came to stand beside him. That went well, she said. Better than well. William's voice was rough with emotion. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like I have a daughter again. You always had a daughter, now you have a relationship with her. That's different. William turned to face her. You did this. You made this possible. We did this. Together, Sophie corrected gently. That's what partnership means. He pulled her into a hug. Unexpected, brief, but warm, real. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Sophie hugged him back, felt his heartbeat against her chest, steady, alive, and felt her own heart respond. Not with obligation, not with gratitude, with something deeper, something that scared her, but also felt inevitable. They were falling, both of them. The question was whether they would catch each other, or whether the landing would shatter them both. Only time would tell. The tabloid arrived with the morning paper. Thompson brought it to William's study along with the usual stack of business journals and financial reports. But it was the tabloid that William stared at, the one with Sophie's face on the cover, and the headline in bold letters that made his jaw tighten. Fortune Hunter, inside the Ashford marriage scandal. Sophie found him an hour later, still sitting at his desk, the paper spread in front of him. She knew immediately, could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the careful blankness of his expression. Let me see it, she said quietly. William pushed the paper across the desk without a word. Sophie picked it up with hands that wanted to tremble, made herself read every word. They had done their research, known exactly where to cut deepest. The article detailed her debts down to the dollar, her mother's illness, the timeline suggesting she had targeted William deliberately, photos of her leaving the hospital, photos of her at the diner in her stained uniform, a quote from her former landlord about the eviction notices. Everything designed to paint her as a calculating opportunist. But the worst part was the photo. Sophie with James Porter outside the hospital, coffee cups in hand, James's hand on her shoulder in what the caption called an intimate gesture. The implication was clear. Secret boyfriend. Affair. Proof that Sophie was using William while maintaining a relationship with someone her own age. It's not true, Sophie said, her voice steady despite the sick feeling in her stomach. James is a friend. That's all he's ever been. I know. William's voice was flat, controlled. But it doesn't matter what's true. Only what people believe. The words hit harder than anger would have. He believed her. But the damage was done anyway. Truth was irrelevant in the face of a good story. Sophie set down the paper. Who did this? Does it matter? Yes. Because someone went digging into my life. Someone paid for this investigation. Someone wants to destroy us. William was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a business card. Marcus Ashford, Chief Operating Officer. Your nephew. He's been positioning himself to take over the company for years. This marriage threatens that. If I have a wife, she has claims, potential heirs. It disrupts his plans. So he's trying to prove I'm unfit, that you've lost your judgment. Something like that. William stood, walked to the window, looked out over the gardens. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have protected you better. I don't need protection. Sophie joined him at the window. I need us to stand together. Show them this doesn't break us. Are you sure? Because if you want out, I'll understand. The contract has an escape clause. You could take it, walk away. I'd make sure your mother's care continued. No penalties. Sophie looked at his reflection in the glass, at the man trying so hard to give her an out, to do the noble thing, even though it would cost him. Is that what you want? For me to leave? No. The word came out rough, honest. But I won't trap you in this, not if it becomes unbearable. Then I'm staying. Sophie turned to face him directly, because walking away now would prove them right. Would say I was only here for money, I'm not giving them that satisfaction. William's eyes searched her face. Why? Because. Sophie hesitated, then decided on truth. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, this stopped being just an arrangement. And I'm not running from something real just because it's hard. The words hung between them, not quite a declaration, but close. William's hand found hers, squeezed. We'll get through this, he said. Together. They got through breakfast, through the sympathetic looks from Mrs. Chen, through the phone calls from William's lawyer about potential lawsuits for defamation, through all the machinery that kicked into gear when rich people were attacked in print. But the afternoon brought worse news. Eleanor called. Her voice was wrong, tight with fear barely contained. Sophie, I need you to come to the hospital. Dr. Kim wants to talk to both of us. Sophie's heart dropped. She knew that tone, had heard it before when there was bad news that could not be delivered over the phone. I'll be right there. William drove her. Did not ask if she wanted him there, just got in the car and took her. His presence solid and grounding when Sophie felt like she might fly apart. Dr. Kim's office felt smaller than Sophie remembered. The family photos seemed to mock her. Look at this normal life, this happy doctor with her healthy children, while Sophie's mother was. The scans show progression, Dr. Kim said without preamble. Doctors learned not to soften these blows. Better to be direct. The cancer has spread faster than we hoped. The current treatment is not working as well as we need it to. What are our options? Eleanor's voice was steady. She had been through this before. Knew the script. There's an experimental protocol, more aggressive, combination immunotherapy with targeted radiation. Early trials show promise. But, Dr. Kim paused. It's expensive. Insurance won't cover experimental treatment. The cost is approximately $250,000 for a full course. The number landed like a physical blow. Sophie did the math instantly. She had received money from William, but not that much, not nearly that much, and asking for more. After the tabloid article, after the accusations that she was a gold digger. I'll cover it, William said quietly. All of it. Whatever she needs. Sophie turned to him. No, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. People will say this is why I married you. That I planned this, that I'm using you. Let them say it. William looked at Eleanor, at Sophie. Your mother's life is more important than their opinions. Mr. Ashford, Eleanor said carefully, I appreciate the offer, but I need to know, is this because you care about my daughter, or because you're trying to buy her gratitude? The bluntness of it made Sophie flinch, but William met Eleanor's eyes steadily. Both. I do care about Sophie, more than I should give in our arrangement. And yes, part of me hopes that helping you will make her see me differently. But mostly, he paused. Mostly it's because I failed to save the people I loved. My wife died while I was across the world. My daughter needed me and I wasn't there. I can't fix those failures, but I can help you. And I will, whether Sophie stays with me or not. Eleanor held his gaze, measuring, then nodded slowly. All right, thank you. Sophie wanted to argue, to protest, to maintain some semblance of independence, but her mother was dying. What was pride worth compared to that? Nothing, less than nothing. Thank you, she whispered to William. He took her hand. You don't need to thank me. That evening, Sophie found herself in the conservatory, among the orchids that William tended with such care. She was sitting on the floor when William found her, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. Not crying, just sitting in the quiet and trying to process everything. He sat beside her, did not speak, just existed in the same space, letting her have her grief. I'm so tired, Sophie said finally. Tired of being judged, tired of fighting, tired of feeling like I'm failing no matter what I do. You're not failing. Everyone thinks I'm using you. Even after I defend myself, even after I try to prove I'm here for the right reasons, they still think I'm a gold digger who got lucky. Does it matter what they think? Sophie looked at him. Shouldn't it? No. William shifted slightly, turned to face her more directly. Here's what I learned building a company from nothing. People will always find reasons to dismiss you, to explain away your success. If you're poor and become rich, you must have cheated. If you're a woman in power, you must have slept your way there. If you marry someone outside your supposed social class, you must have ulterior motives. The truth never matters as much as the story they want to believe. So what do? You ignore them. You build your life. You love who you love. You help who you can help, and you let their noise fade into background static. William's voice was firm, certain. I spent too many years caring what people thought, trying to prove I was worthy. It cost me my wife and my daughter. I won't make that mistake again. Sophie felt something shift, a weight lifting that she had not known she was carrying. You're right. I've been so focused on proving I'm not a gold digger that I forgot to just live, to just be. Exactly. William stood, offered his hand. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her to a part of the estate she had not explored, a converted garage that had been turned into something else. He unlocked the door, flipped on lights, and Sophie stepped into a dream. The space was set up as a community center. Tables and chairs, a small kitchen, bookshelves, art supplies, medical equipment, everything you would need to run health and wellness programs. I started putting this together last week, William said, after you talked about wanting to help people who can't afford care. I thought we could create something, a foundation. Provide healthcare access to families like yours used to be, like you were before we met. Sophie walked through the space, touching surfaces, imagining it full of people, full of life and purpose and meaning. You did this for me? For us, William corrected gently. I have money. You have passion and knowledge. Together, we could actually make a difference. What would we call it? Catherine's Legacy Foundation. If you're comfortable with that. William's voice went soft. She would have loved this. Helping people, making the world smaller and kinder. Sophie turned to him, saw the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability. This was not about buying her affection. This was about building something that mattered, something that would outlast both of them. Yes, she said, let's do it. They spent the next 6 weeks building something neither had expected when they signed a contract. A partnership, a friendship, something that looked increasingly like love, even if neither was quite ready to name it. Diana came to dinner every Sunday, brought her girlfriend Sarah one evening, an architect with kind eyes and a dry sense of humor. The four of them laughed over Mrs. Chen's cooking and slowly became something like family. Eleanor's new treatment was brutal, but working. The markers were improving. Dr. Kim was cautiously optimistic. Sophie visited 3 times a week, held her mother's hand through the nausea and exhaustion, whispered promises that it would be worth it. The foundation took shape. Sophie hired a small staff. James Porter came on as medical director. They set up partnerships with local clinics, established protocols. Within a month, they had helped their first family, a single mother whose son needed surgery they could not afford. The look on that woman's face when Sophie told her the foundation would cover everything. That look made every cruel comment worth enduring. And slowly, carefully, Sophie and William stopped pretending, stopped maintaining the fiction of separate lives in the same house. They moved Sophie's things into William's room, into their room, shared space honestly, shared late-night conversations and early morning coffee and the small intimacies that make a marriage real. One evening, after Diana had left and Mrs. Chen had retired, they danced in the conservatory. No music, just William humming tunelessly, and Sophie laughing at his terrible sense of rhythm. And when he pulled her close, when she rested her head on his shoulder, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I love you, William said into her hair. I know I already told you. I know you're not ready to say it back. But I needed you to know again. This is real for me. Sophie pulled back enough to see his face. I'm falling for you. I don't know if that's the same as love yet, but I'm falling, and it terrifies me. Why? Because you're dying, Sophie's voice broke. Because I have maybe 5 years with you if we're lucky. Because loving you means signing up to watch you leave. And I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. William cupped her face gently. Then don't think about the end. Think about now, this moment, the ones we have. Let that be enough. Is it enough? It has to be, because it's all any of us get. William kissed her forehead. Catherine died at 43. We thought we had decades. We got cut short. But I don't regret loving her. Even knowing how it ended. The love was worth the loss. Sophie kissed him then. Really kissed him. Not the careful pecks they had exchanged for appearances, but a real kiss. Deep and honest and full of all the feelings she was too scared to voice. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I'm still scared, she whispered. Me too. but let's be scared together. They went to bed that night wrapped around each other. Sophie fell asleep listening to William's heartbeat, the rhythm steady and strong and alive. She tried not to think about the fact that one day that rhythm would stop, tried to focus on the now, the warmth of his arms, the safety of this moment. But in the morning, everything changed. Sophie woke to the sound of coughing, harsh, wet, wrong. She sat up to see William bent over the side of the bed, hand pressed to his mouth. When he pulled his hand away, there was blood, dark red against his pale skin. William. Sophie was out of bed in an instant, nursing mode overriding panic. Let me see. It's nothing. William tried to wave her off. Just irritation from. That's not irritation, that's blood. When did this start? Few days ago, maybe a week. A week? Sophie's voice rose. You've been coughing up blood for a week and didn't tell me? I didn't want to worry you. William James Ashford. Sophie used his full name, made him look at her. You don't get to do this. You don't get to hide your health from me because you're trying to protect me. I'm fine. You're not fine. Coughing blood is not fine. We're calling Dr. Torres right now. It's 6 in the morning. I don't care. Sophie already had her phone, already dialing. This is not negotiable. Dr. Torres arrived within an hour, examined William thoroughly, ordered immediate tests, blood work, imaging, a full cardiac workup. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sophie could read the concern in his eyes. The results came back that afternoon. Sophie sat beside William in Dr. Torres's office, held his hand, and tried to prepare for whatever was coming. Your heart function has declined significantly, Dr. Torres said without preamble. The valve replacement we did 2 years ago is failing. Combined with the overall deterioration from congestive heart failure, you're in serious trouble. How serious? William's voice was steady. Without intervention, 6 months, maybe less. You need surgery, soon, replace the valve again, and potentially do a more extensive repair. And with surgery? Sophie heard herself ask. 50-50 chance. His age and overall condition make it risky. But without it, Dr. Torres shook his head. There's no other option. Sophie felt the room tilt. 50-50, coin flip odds. And if the coin landed wrong, William would die on the operating table. But if they did nothing, he would definitely die. Slowly, over 6 painful months. I need to think about it, William said. There's not much time to think. You're symptomatic. Coughing blood means the pressure is building. We need to schedule this within the next few weeks. They drove home in silence. Sophie's mind was racing, but she could not find words, could not process the magnitude of what they had just learned. That night, they lay in bed not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling. Finally, William spoke. I'm not sure I want the surgery. What? Sophie rolled to face him. What are you talking about? I'm 73. I've had a good life, made my peace with most of my mistakes. Maybe it's time to just let go, spend whatever time I have left living instead of fighting. You can't give up. I'm not giving up. I'm choosing quality over quantity, 6 months of real life or maybe 5 years of declining health in hospitals. I'm not sure the extra time is worth it. Sophie felt anger rising, sharp and hot. You don't get to make that choice alone anymore. This affects me too. Exactly. William's voice was sad. If I have the surgery and it goes wrong, you'll blame yourself. If I don't have it and I die anyway, at least you won't have that guilt. That's not how this works. Sophie sat up, turned on the lamp. We're partners. You don't make major medical decisions to protect me. We make them together. And if I've already decided? Then you're being a coward. Sophie's voice was fierce. You told me not to let fear make my choices. Now you're doing exactly that. You're afraid of the surgery, so you're framing it as noble sacrifice. That's not fair, isn't it? Sophie's eyes were blazing. You're afraid of dying on the table, of leaving me, of failing one more time. So you'd rather just give up and call it acceptance. William stared at her. Then slowly, his expression crumbled. You're right. God help me, you're right. I'm terrified. Then be terrified. Sophie took his face in her hands. Be terrified and do it anyway. Fight. Because I'm not ready to lose you. And I know that's selfish. I know I should be noble and say I'll support whatever you choose. But I can't. I need you to fight. Even knowing it might not work. Especially knowing that. Because at least then we tried. At least then we didn't just give up. William pulled her close. Held her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Okay, I'll do the surgery. I'll fight. Promise? I promise. But the universe was not done testing them. 2 days later, Marcus appeared with a lawyer and a stack of documents. Requested an emergency board meeting. Presented evidence of financial irregularities that supposedly tied back to Sophie. The documents were well-crafted lies, showing transfers from company accounts to offshore locations, timestamps suggesting Sophie had influenced William to move money, building a case that she was manipulating him for access to his fortune. This is fabricated, William said coldly. We have an independent forensic accountant's report, Marcus countered. The pattern is clear. Your judgment has been compromised. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked skeptical. Others seemed convinced. The whisper started. Questions about William's mental state. Suggestions that maybe he should step down, for his own good. Diana arrived mid-meeting. She had been alerted by William's assistant, slammed the door open, and strode to the front of the room like an avenging angel. This is a coup, she announced. Pure and simple. Marcus has been positioning to take over for years. Now he's using Dad's marriage as an excuse. Marcus smiled. Calm. Reasonable. I'm protecting the company. And your father. Someone has to. Sophie had been sitting silently through the whole thing, listening, watching. Now she stood. Every eye in the room turned to her. I know what you all think of me. The poor girl who married rich. The gold digger, the opportunist. And you know what? I don't care anymore. She looked around the table, met each gaze directly. I married William because my mother was dying and he offered to help. That's true. I won't apologize for loving my mother enough to make a hard choice. She pulled out her phone, pulled up bank statements. My total compensation since marrying William is $20,000 a month. Do you know what I've done with that money? Paid off my student loans, helped my mother with bills, and donated $15,000 a month to the foundation. I don't need his fortune. I never did. Then explain the offshore accounts, Marcus pressed. I can't, because I didn't create them. Sophie's voice was steel. But I know who did. Someone with access to William's office. Someone who knew his passwords. Someone desperate enough to frame me to get what he wants. You're accusing me? Marcus's composure slipped slightly. I'm stating facts. Let's get that forensic accountant in here. Let's review security footage of William's office. Let's do actual investigating instead of accepting convenient explanations. Diana stepped beside Sophie. I second that motion. Full investigation, real one. Not whatever character assassination this is. The board voted, narrowly, to investigate properly. Marcus's face went dark. This isn't over. No, William said quietly. It's not. But I'll tell you what is over. Your employment. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. The aftermath was brutal. Media got hold of the story. Sophie's face was everywhere again. The allegations, the drama, the scandal. It did not matter that she had been cleared. That investigation would eventually prove Marcus had created the fake documents. The damage was done. Sophie could not leave the estate without being accosted. Reporters shouting questions. Photographers snapping pictures. The few times she went to the grocery store, people recognized her. Some sympathetic, most judgmental. One woman actually spat at her feet. She stopped going out, stayed at the estate, felt the walls closing in. Diana found her one afternoon sitting in Catherine's old studio, surrounded by paintings and memories and grief. You should leave, Sophie said without looking up. Everyone says so. That I'm destroying his reputation, his company, his life. Everyone is an idiot. Diana sat beside her. You're the best thing that's happened to him in 15 years. I'm a liability. You're a person he loves. There's a difference. Sophie finally looked at Diana. Do you ever wonder if love is worth all this? The pain, the judgment, the constant battle. Every day, Diana's voice was soft. Sarah and I have been together for 3 years. Do you know how many times I've been called slurs? How many clients my firm lost when I came out? How many so-called friends disappeared? Love costs. Always. The question is whether the person is worth the price. Is Sarah worth it? Without question. Diana smiled. She sees me, really sees me. Not the Ashford name, not the money, not the armor I wear. Just me. Flawed and scared and trying. That's worth any price. Your father sees me like that. I know. Diana squeezed Sophie's hand. That's why you can't leave. Not because he needs you, but because you need each other. And that's rare, too rare to give up on. But Sophie could not shake the feeling that she was watching a train wreck in slow motion, could not stop thinking that William would be better off without her, that loving him was selfish when it cost him so much. The thought grew and festered, until one morning she woke up and knew with terrible clarity what she had to do. She had to leave. Not forever, not permanently, just for a while. Give William space to focus on his health without the constant scandal. Give herself room to breathe without the crushing weight of judgment. Let things calm down before the surgery. Then maybe, if he survived, they could try again, properly, when the dust settled. She wrote the letter in the morning while William was in a business call. Kept it simple, honest. William, I love you. I'm more certain of that than anything. But I can't watch you destroy yourself fighting my battles. The surgery is in 2 weeks. You need to focus on that, on getting strong, not on defending me from people who will never accept us anyway. I'm going to stay with my mom for a while. Give you space. Give us both space to think clearly. I'm not leaving you. I'm trying to save you. From me. From this mess. From the weight of trying to protect me when you should be protecting yourself. I'll come back. After the surgery, after you're well. We'll figure this out then. I love you. That's why I have to go. Sophie. She packed a small bag, left the letter on their bed, slipped out of the estate before anyone could stop her, took a taxi to her mother's apartment, the same small place she had lived before. Before William, before everything changed. Eleanor took one look at her face and opened her arms. Sophie collapsed into them, sobbed like a child. Her mother held her and rocked her and whispered that it would be okay. Eventually. Somehow. But Sophie did not feel like it would be okay. Felt like she had just made the worst decision of her life. Had run when she should have stayed. Had chosen safety over courage. Back at the estate, William returned from his call to find the empty bedroom. The letter. He read it once, twice, 3 times, looking for something he might have missed. Some explanation that made sense. Then he crumpled it in his fist, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt more alone than he had in 15 years, since Catherine died, since he learned that love always ends in loss. He had thought maybe, this time, it might be different, that Sophie would stay, that he would finally get to keep something precious. But she was gone, and he had surgery in 2 weeks that he might not survive, and the one person he wanted beside him had decided he was better off alone. Diana found him there an hour later, still holding the crumpled letter, still sitting in the same spot. She left, he said quietly. I know Mrs. Chen called me. She thinks I'm better off without her, that she's protecting me. Are you going to let her? William looked at his daughter, at the woman who had forgiven him despite having every reason not to. What choice do I have? You go after her. Diana's voice was fierce. You tell her she doesn't get to make this decision alone, that you're partners, that you need her, especially now. What if she's right? What if I am better off focusing on the surgery without the distraction? Love isn't a distraction. Diana knelt in front of him. Love is the point. Mom taught me that. You're finally learning it. Don't unlearn it now just because it's hard. William thought about Sophie's face when she had told him to fight, about the way she held his hand through bad news, about the sound of her laughter in the conservatory, about waking up beside her and feeling, for the first time in years, like he was actually alive. You're right, he said. I need to get her back. But his body had other plans. That evening, mid-sentence in a conversation with Diana about how to approach Sophie, William's heart stuttered, skipped, then seemed to stop altogether. He grabbed the edge of the table, went pale, collapsed. Diana called 911, performed CPR while they waited, screamed at her father to stay with her, to keep breathing, to not leave her again. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. Paramedics worked on him, got his heart restarted, rushed him to the hospital. Diana rode beside him, called Sophie, left voicemail after voicemail. Sophie, please. Dad collapsed. He needs surgery now. Please come. Sophie got the messages an hour later. She had been at the free clinic with Maya, helping organize supplies, trying to distract herself. She listened to Diana's voice, desperate, scared, and her world stopped. She ran, left everything, caught an Uber to the hospital, burst through the emergency room doors and found Diana in the surgical waiting room, pacing, red-eyed. "How is he?" Sophie could barely get the words out. "In surgery, emergency. They couldn't wait. His heart." Diana's voice broke. "He might not make it." Sophie sat down hard, felt her legs give out. This was her fault. If she had not left, if she had been there. Maybe she could have caught the signs earlier, could have called for help sooner. Could have. "Stop!" Diana sat beside her. "Read her mind. This isn't your fault. His heart has been failing for months. This was always going to happen. But I wasn't here. When he needed me, I ran. And now you're here. That's what matters." Mrs. Chen arrived. Then Eleanor in a wheelchair, weak from treatment but refusing to stay home. Then Maya. Then James. All the people who loved Sophie gathering around, creating a circle of support, of love, of presence. The surgery lasted 11 hours, the longest 11 hours of Sophie's life. She paced, sat, stood, prayed to a God she was not sure she believed in anymore, made bargains, promises. "Please let him live. Please. I'll do anything, give anything. Just let him live." At hour 7, Diana pressed something into Sophie's hand. An envelope. "Dad gave this to his lawyer 3 weeks ago. Instructions to give it to you if anything happened." Sophie stared at the envelope, was afraid to open it, afraid of what it meant. Finally, with shaking hands, she broke the seal. The letter was in William's handwriting, slightly shaky, but still him. "My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm either in surgery or I'm gone. Either way, I need you to know some truths. You changed my life, not by being my wife, not by the arrangement, but by demanding I be human again, by seeing past my walls, by loving me even when I gave you every reason not to. I know the world judged us. Let them. What we built was real, more real than anything I've had in 15 years. If I survive this surgery, I want to spend whatever time I have left proving I'm worthy of the choice you made. If I don't survive, I need you to know you gave me the greatest gift. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me purpose beyond profit. You gave me love when I thought I was too broken for it. The will has been updated. Diana gets the company. She's earned it. The estate goes to her, too. It was her mother's home. It should stay in the family. But the foundation is yours. Run it. Grow it. Help people the way you helped me. There's money set aside. Enough that you'll never have to compromise yourself again. Not payment. A gift. Because I want you to have the freedom to build the life you deserve. I love you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. If there's any justice, I'll find Catherine and tell her about the extraordinary woman who helped me remember how to live. Thank you for everything. All my love, William." Sophie read the letter 3 times through tears, then pressed it to her chest and let herself break. Sobbed in Diana's arms while Eleanor held her hand and Maya rubbed her back. All these women loving her, supporting her, being present. At hour 11, the surgeon finally emerged, still in scrubs, exhausted. Everyone stood, held their breath. The surgery was complicated, more extensive than we planned, but he's alive, critical but stable. Sophie's knees gave out. Diana caught her. They clung to each other and cried, relief, joy, terror, all of it mixing together. "Can we see him?" Diana asked. "ICU, one at a time, just for a few minutes." Sophie and Diana looked at each other. "You go first," Diana said. "He'll want to see you first." The ICU was cold, sterile, beeping machines and antiseptic smells. William lay in the bed looking smaller than Sophie had ever seen him. Tubes and wires everywhere, face pale, but breathing, alive. Sophie took his hand, careful of the IV, leaned close. "I'm here. I'm sorry I left. I'm here now and I'm not leaving again." His eyes fluttered, opened just slightly, focused on her face. "Sophie," he whispered, voice rough from intubation. "Don't talk. Save your strength." Scared, he managed. "Me too. But we're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." His grip tightened slightly on her hand. "Love you. I love you too. So much." Sophie kissed his forehead. "Now rest. I'll be right outside. Not going anywhere." His eyes closed, but he was smiling, just slightly. Enough. Sophie stayed by his bedside for the next 48 hours. The critical period, when complications were most likely, when they would know if his body would accept the new valve, if his heart would stabilize, if he would live, or if this was just prolonging the inevitable. Diana brought her food. Eleanor visited between treatments. Mrs. Chen came with fresh clothes. Maya brought terrible hospital coffee and sat with her in silence, all of them present, all of them holding vigil. On the morning of day 3, William's eyes opened fully, clearer, more alert. He looked around, found Sophie asleep in the chair beside his bed, hand still holding his. Even in sleep, she had not let go. He squeezed her hand. She woke immediately, alert, nurse mode. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I've been hit by a truck, but alive." "How long?" 3 days. "You've been here the whole time?" "Every minute." William's eyes filled with tears. "I got your letter, before the collapse." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left." "You were trying to protect me, I understand. But Sophie," his voice was stronger now, firmer. "I don't need protection, I need you. Just you, beside me, whatever comes." "I'm here, I'm not leaving again." "Promise?" "Promise." Sophie leaned down, kissed him gently. "We're in this together, for better or worse, remember? Till death do us part." William smiled. "Though I'd prefer we delay that part for as long as possible." Sophie laughed, crying and laughing at the same time. "Deal!" Outside in the waiting room, Diana watched through the window, saw her father and Sophie, saw the love there, real and hard-won and worth every struggle. "She's good for him," Eleanor said quietly, standing beside Diana with her IV pole. "He's good for her, too." Diana smiled. "They're good for each other. That's rare. Worth fighting for? Always." Eleanor patted Diana's hand. "Always worth fighting for." And somewhere in that hospital, in that moment, 5 people who had been strangers a few months ago became family. Not through blood, not through obligation, but through choice, through showing up, through loving each other through the hardest parts. William Ashford would spend 2 more weeks in the hospital, would face a long recovery, would have scares and setbacks and moments when the future looked uncertain. But he would face it all with Sophie beside him. And that would make all the difference. The year that was supposed to be simple had become complicated and beautiful and terrifying and real. And neither of them would have changed a single moment. Well, maybe a few moments, but not the important ones, not the ones that mattered. Those were perfect, worth every cost, worth every fear, worth everything. Recovery was not a straight line. It was a jagged path through pain and setbacks and small victories that felt enormous. William came home from the hospital 3 weeks after surgery, still weak, still needing assistance with basic tasks, still looking far too fragile for a man who had once commanded boardrooms and built empires. Sophie had converted the downstairs guest room into a temporary bedroom. Stairs were forbidden for another month. Dr. Torres had been clear about that. No unnecessary strain on the healing heart. So they lived on the first floor of the massive estate, just the 2 of them and Mrs. Chen and the nurses who came twice daily to check vitals and change dressings. The nurses were professional, efficient, but Sophie could see the questions in their eyes, could hear the unspoken judgment. This young woman caring for a man 50 years older. The math was easy, the conclusions obvious. Gold digger playing devoted wife until the will was read. Sophie stopped caring what they thought, had more important things to worry about, like the fact that William could barely walk from the bed to the bathroom without becoming winded, like the medication schedule that required setting alarms for 2 in the morning, like the way he looked at her sometimes with fear in his eyes. Not fear of dying, fear of being a burden. "You're not a burden," she told him one night when she caught that look. "Stop thinking you are." "I can't even dress myself without help." William's voice was bitter, angry at his own weakness. "This is not how I wanted you to see me. I see you fighting. That's all that matters." Sophie helped him with the buttons on his pajama shirt, her hands steady even though her heart ached. "You're alive. Everything else is details." But the details were exhausting. Physical therapy 3 times a week, cardiac rehab twice a week, doctor appointments, medication adjustments, the constant vigilance required to keep someone alive who had come so close to dying. Sophie had nursing training, but she had never been a caregiver to someone she loved. The emotional weight was different, heavier, more complicated. She woke up tired, went to bed exhausted, lived in a state of constant low-level anxiety, listening for changes in his breathing, watching for signs of infection or rejection or any of the 100 things that could go wrong after major cardiac surgery. Diana visited daily, brought work for William to review when he was strong enough, updates on the company. Diana had stepped into the CEO role seamlessly, was proving that she had inherited her father's business acumen along with his eyes. She was good at it, better than Marcus had ever been. The board had removed Marcus completely after the investigation proved he had fabricated the financial documents. Criminal charges were pending. His wife Victoria had filed for divorce. His career was over. His reputation destroyed. Everything he had worked for gone because he had tried to take what was not his. William should have felt vindicated. Instead, he just felt sad. Marcus had been family, flawed and desperate, but family. The betrayal hurt in ways that had nothing to do with business. Eleanor's treatment was working, really working. The aggressive protocol had been brutal, had left her weak and sick for weeks. But the scans showed the tumor shrinking. Dr. Kim was using words like remission, like survival, like hope. Sophie visited her mother twice a week, brought her meals and magazines, and sat beside her bed talking about nothing important, about everything important, about the strange life Sophie was living now, about whether love was enough to bridge impossible gaps. "Your father and I had 12 years, Eleanor said one afternoon, voice still raspy from treatment, but strong in the ways that mattered. 12 years before the heart attack took him. I would have wanted more. Anyone would. But I don't regret a single day, even knowing how it ended. Even knowing you'd lose him? Especially knowing that. Because the alternative was never loving him at all. And that would have been the real tragedy." Eleanor reached for Sophie's hand. "Love is always worth it, even when it costs everything." "But what if I'm losing myself?" Sophie had not meant to say it, had not even known she was thinking it until the words were out. "What if I'm so focused on taking care of him that I forget who I am?" "Then you find balance. You remember that being his partner doesn't mean disappearing into his needs. You build your own life alongside the life you share." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "You're allowed to be both, wife and woman, caregiver and person with your own dreams. Don't let anyone make you choose." The words stayed with Sophie, echoed in her mind during the long days of William's recovery. She was barely 23, had put her own life on hold to marry a dying man, had sacrificed her independence for practical reasons that had somehow transformed into love. But who was she, beyond Mrs. William Ashford, beyond the young wife and the devoted caregiver, and the scandal everyone whispered about? The foundation gave her purpose, gave her something that was hers. She worked on it during William's afternoon naps, during the hours when nurses took over care, built partnerships with clinics, hired staff, set up systems for families to apply for help. Within 2 months of launching, they had assisted 50 families, covered medical bills that would have destroyed them, given people hope where there had been none. James Porter was invaluable. His medical expertise combined with his genuine compassion made him perfect for the role. He interviewed families, assessed needs, connected people with resources, and he never once made Sophie feel awkward about their friendship, never brought up the tabloid photos or the implications. One afternoon, as they were reviewing applications in the foundation office, James looked up from his paperwork. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sophie braced herself. "Okay, are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know, is anyone really happy? Or do we just have moments of happiness between the hard parts?" It's very philosophical," James smiled, but not an answer. Sophie thought about it, really thought. "I'm terrified. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. But when I'm with him, when William looks at me like I'm the only thing keeping him grounded, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Is that happiness? Sounds like love to me. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe that's what love is. Choosing to be somewhere even when it's hard, because the alternative is worse. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sophie was at the foundation office, reviewing budget projections. The voice on the other end was professional, formal, cold. "Miss Carter, this is Janet Reynolds from the Texas Board of Nursing. We're calling regarding a formal complaint that's been filed against you." Sophie's blood went cold. "Complaint? I'm not even licensed yet. I'm still a student. The complaint alleges ethical violations, specifically that you use patient information to manipulate a vulnerable individual for personal gain. We're required to investigate. You'll need to appear before the ethics committee. A hearing has been scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Who filed the complaint? We can't disclose that information at this time, but I can tell you the allegations are serious. If proven, they could prevent you from ever obtaining your nursing license. The line went dead. Sophie sat staring at her phone. Everything she had worked for. 4 years of school, thousands of dollars in debt. The dream of helping people that had sustained her through every hard moment. All of it at risk. She knew who had filed the complaint, had to be connected to Marcus somehow. One last attack from a desperate man trying to hurt William through her. But knowing did not make it less terrifying, did not make the threat less real. She did not tell William that night. He was having a good day, had walked to the conservatory and back without stopping, had laughed at something Mrs. Chen said about Diana's girlfriend, had played a few notes on the piano, the first time since surgery. Sophie did not want to ruin that with her own crisis. But secrets had a weight, and the weight of this one pressed on her chest until she could barely breathe. Diana noticed first, showed up for dinner, and took one look at Sophie's face. What happened? Nothing, I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Diana glanced at William, who was focused on his meal. Study. Now. In William's study with the door closed, Sophie broke down, told Diana about the complaint, about the ethics hearing, about the very real possibility that she would never be a nurse, that everything she had sacrificed for would be taken away because she had dared to marry someone people disapproved of. We'll fight this, Diana said immediately. I'll represent you myself. This is harassment, retaliation. No ethics board will side with a complaint filed in bad faith. You don't know that. I know you did nothing wrong. Diana's voice was fierce. You fell in love and got married. That's not unethical. That's human. But Sophie could not shake the fear, could not stop seeing her future crumbling. She had given up so much, had compromised her principles, had married for money even if love had come later. Maybe this was karma, the universe balancing accounts. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks away. Sophie threw herself into preparation, gathered documentation, character references, evidence that she had never accessed Eleanor's medical records inappropriately, that she had not used patient information for personal gain, that her relationship with William had developed separately from any professional capacity. But the preparation was draining, added to the exhaustion of caring for William, the stress of running the foundation, the constant background noise of public judgment. Sophie felt herself fracturing, pieces of her pulled in too many directions until she was not sure what would be left when everything settled. William noticed. How could he not? She was quieter, more distant, present physically but absent in the ways that mattered. One evening, he confronted her. Tell me what's wrong. And don't say nothing. I can see it eating you alive. Sophie wanted to deflect, to protect him from one more problem. But they had promised each other honesty, so she told him. Everything. The complaint, the hearing, the fear that she had destroyed her own future by loving him. William listened without interrupting. When she finished, his face was pale. This is my fault. No, it's Marcus's fault, or whoever filed the complaint, not yours. I dragged you into my world, made you a target. If you had never met me, you would be graduating soon, getting your license, starting your career. Instead, you're fighting to prove you're not a criminal. Instead, I'm here, with you, running a foundation that actually helps people instead of just dreaming about it. Sophie's voice broke. I don't regret marrying you. Even if it costs me everything, I don't regret it. You should. William's eyes were devastated. You should regret me. Well, I don't, so stop trying to make me. They did not speak for the rest of the evening, just existed in wounded silence, both carrying guilt and fear and love that felt too heavy to hold. That night, Sophie could not sleep. Lay awake listening to William breathe, the steady rhythm that she had learned to monitor for irregularities, the sound that meant he was alive, here, with her. But for how long? He was 73, had survived major surgery but was still fragile, still facing years of decline even if everything went perfectly. And she was 23, had decades ahead of her, decades that might be defined by this choice she had made. by the scandal that would follow her, by the doors that would close because she had loved the wrong person. Was it worth it? She did not know anymore. At 3 in the morning, she got up, dressed quietly, wrote a note, not a goodbye, just an explanation. William, I need some space. Need to clear my head before the hearing. I'm going to stay with Mom for a few days. I'm not leaving you. I need to remember who I am when I'm not defined by us. Please understand. I love you. I'll be back. I promise. Sophie. She left the note on his pillow, packed a small bag, slipped out of the estate as the first hints of dawn colored the sky, drove to Eleanor's apartment, let herself in with the key her mother had given her, crawled into her old bed in her old room, and finally, let herself cry. Eleanor found her there hours later, did not ask questions, just made tea, sat on the edge of the bed, waited. I'm drowning, Sophie said finally. I love him, I do, but I don't know who I am anymore. I'm his wife, his caregiver, the scandal everyone talks about, the girl who married for money. But who am I? What do I want? I can't remember. Then maybe it's time to figure that out. Eleanor's voice was gentle, not judgmental, not telling Sophie what to do, just offering space to think. Sophie spent 3 days at her mother's apartment, 3 days of quiet, of sleeping without listening for alarms, of being just Sophie Carter again, not Mrs. Ashford, not the foundation director, not the young wife of an old billionaire, just a woman trying to figure out what she wanted from her one wild and precious life. She went to the free clinic where she used to volunteer, helped with intake, held babies while their mothers filled out forms, listened to elderly patients talk about their aches and pains, did the work that had made her want to be a nurse in the first place, work that was simple and direct and meaningful. Maya found her there on day 2, brought coffee and sat beside her during lunch break. You okay, honey? I don't know. Sophie wrapped her hands around the paper cup, felt the warmth seep into her palms. I thought I could do this, be his partner, build a life together. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the cost is too high. What cost? Your reputation? Your career? Myself. Sophie looked at her friend. I'm so busy being what he needs that I forgot to be what I need. And I don't know how to do both. Have you talked to him about this? How can I? He's recovering from major surgery. He's fragile. I can't add my existential crisis to his plate. So you'll just suffer in silence? That's not love. That's martyrdom. Maya's voice was firm. Love means being honest even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Sophie knew she was right, but knowing and doing were different things. It was easier to run, to hide in her mother's apartment and pretend the problem would solve itself if she just avoided it long enough. But on day 3, her phone rang. Diana. He's not doing well. Diana's voice was tight with worry. Won't eat, barely sleeping. Keeps asking if you're coming back. I know you need space, I respect that. But Sophie, he thinks you've left for good, and it's killing him. The words hit like a punch. Sophie closed her eyes. I left a note, said I'd be back. And he's terrified you're lying, that this is like before. When you left and he collapsed. He won't say it, but I can see it. The fear. Diana paused. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what's happening. Sophie made her decision in that moment. She loved William. That was not in question. But love without boundaries was not sustainable. She needed to be her own person, needed to maintain her identity separate from their relationship. And if he could not understand that, if he needed her to disappear into the role of devoted wife, then maybe they were not as compatible as she had thought. But she owed him honesty, owed him the chance to understand, owed him a real conversation instead of just running away. She packed her bag, hugged her mother goodbye, drove back to the estate. Her hands were shaking on the wheel, but she kept driving, kept moving forward even though every instinct screamed to run. William was in the conservatory when she arrived, sitting among the orchids, staring at nothing. He looked thinner, grayer, like he had aged years in 3 days. When he heard her footsteps, he looked up. The hope in his eyes almost broke her. You came back, he said, voice rough. I said I would. Sophie set down her bag, sat beside him on the bench. We need to talk. If you're leaving, just say so. I can handle it. I've survived worse. I'm not leaving, but I can't keep doing this the way we have been. I'm losing myself. becoming just an extension of you. And that's not your fault, it's mine. For not setting boundaries, for not maintaining my own identity. William was quiet, processing. Finally, what do you need? I need to finish school, get my license, build my career. Not just run the foundation, but actually practice nursing, work in clinics, help people directly. Sophie took his hand. I need to be my own person with my own life, not just your wife. You've always been your own person, have I? Or have I been so focused on taking care of you that I forgot to take care of myself? Sophie's voice was gentle but firm. I love you, but I can't be everything you need all the time. I need space to be me, and I need to know you're okay with that. William thought about it. Really thought. This was not easy for him. His whole life had been about control, about managing, about fixing problems. But Sophie was not a problem to be fixed. She was a person with her own needs and dreams and right to autonomy. Okay, he said finally, what does that look like? I go back to school part-time, finish my degree, take the licensing exam when I'm ready, work at the foundation but also at free clinics, build a career that's mine. Sophie squeezed his hand. And you focus on your recovery, on rebuilding your relationship with Diana, on being healthy, not on taking care of me or protecting me from everything hard. You're asking me to let you struggle. I'm asking you to trust that I can handle my own struggles, that I don't need you to fix everything, just to be there when I need support. That's hard for me. William's voice was raw, honest. I'm used to solving problems, especially for people I love. I know, but you have to learn to sit with things you can't fix. That's what partnership means, not fixing, just being present. Can you teach me how? We'll teach each other. Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder. I'll teach you to let me be independent. You teach me to ask for help when I need it. Deal. William kissed the top of her head. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to be everything. I'm sorry I ran instead of talking. We're learning. That's what matters. They sat in the conservatory until the sun set, talking through logistics, boundaries, expectations, building a new framework for their relationship, one that honored both of them, that made space for Sophie's growth while supporting William's recovery. It was not perfect. Nothing about their situation was, but it was honest. And honesty, they were learning, was the foundation everything else was built on. The ethics hearing arrived too quickly and too slowly all at once. Sophie had prepared as well as she could, had Diana representing her, had character witnesses lined up, Dr. Kim, James, her professors, even Mrs. Chen, who would testify about Sophie's character and integrity. The hearing room was smaller than Sophie expected. A conference table, 5 board members, a court reporter. The complainant was not present. The whole thing felt surreal, like a trial for a crime she had not committed. The board chair read the complaint aloud. Allegation that Sophie Carter had accessed patient medical records for personal gain, that she had used knowledge of Eleanor Carter's condition to manipulate William Ashford into marriage, that she had violated patient privacy laws and professional ethics standards. Diana presented Sophie's defense systematically, showed that Sophie had never accessed Eleanor's records, that Eleanor's own doctors had provided all medical information directly, that Sophie's relationship with William had developed independently of any professional capacity, that the complaint was filed by an associate of Marcus Ashford as retaliation for business disputes. The board members asked questions, some skeptical, some sympathetic. Sophie answered honestly, did not try to hide the transactional nature of her marriage's beginning, but explained how it had evolved, how love had grown from unlikely soil. One board member, an older woman named Patricia Hendricks, leaned forward. Miss Carter, do you understand why this situation raises ethical concerns? Even if you did nothing technically wrong, the appearance of impropriety is problematic. I do understand, Sophie said carefully, and if I could go back, I might do things differently. But I can't. All I can do is be honest about what happened and why. My mother was dying. Mr. Ashford offered help. I accepted. It was transactional at first. But people are complicated. Feelings change. Life doesn't fit into neat ethical boxes. And now? Patricia asked. Now what is your relationship? Now we're partners, building a life together, running a foundation that helps families like mine used to be, learning to love each other despite all the reasons we shouldn't. Sophie met her eyes. I made a hard choice in a desperate situation, but I didn't violate any patient trust, didn't access records inappropriately, didn't lie or manipulate. I was honest about what I needed and why, and I'm being honest now. The board deliberated for 2 hours. Sophie waited in the hallway with Diana. William wanted to be there but was still too weak for the stress. Eleanor had come instead, sat holding Sophie's hand and radiating quiet strength. When they were called back in, Sophie's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The board chair cleared her throat. After careful consideration of the evidence and testimony, this board finds no violation of ethical standards. The complaint is dismissed. Your path to licensure remains open. However, she looked at Sophie directly. We strongly recommend that you maintain clear professional boundaries going forward. The appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as actual impropriety. Be mindful of that. Relief flooded through Sophie so completely she had to sit down. Diana squeezed her shoulder. Eleanor was crying happy tears. It was over. She could still become a nurse. Her dream was still alive. Outside the building, Sophie called William, told him the news, heard the relief in his voice match her own. I knew they'd see the truth, he said. I never doubted you. I doubted me, Sophie admitted. Thought maybe I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The only line you crossed was into my life, and I'm grateful for it every day. When Sophie got home, she found the estate transformed, not dramatically, just small touches. Her textbooks organized on a desk in the library, a new laptop set up with the software she needed for school, a schedule posted on the refrigerator showing William's rehab appointments, so Sophie could plan around them rather than having to be at every one. Mrs. Chen smiled when Sophie noticed. Mr. Ashford wanted you to have space to study, to build your own life. He's trying. He is, Sophie agreed, and so am I. That evening, after dinner, William led Sophie to the conservatory, to the bench where they had had so many important conversations, handed her a small box. This is not what you think, he said quickly. Not an engagement ring. We're already married. This is something else. Sophie opened the box. Inside was a simple silver necklace, a pendant in the shape of a stethoscope. Tiny, delicate, beautiful. For the nurse you're becoming, William said. Not just my wife, not just the foundation director, but the woman who knows what she wants and fights for it. I'm proud of you. Sophie put on the necklace, felt the weight of it settle against her chest, right over her heart. This is perfect. Thank you. I also have a question. William's voice was nervous. Not about marriage, we already did that, but about partnership, real partnership, where we both get to be ourselves while building something together. What's the question? Will you marry me again? Not a contract, not an arrangement, a real wedding, with our family, with vows that mean what they say, with a choice made freely instead of desperately. William took her hands. I want to stand in front of the people we love and promise to love you. Not because I paid you, not because we signed papers, but because you're the best thing that ever happened to my stubborn, difficult, complicated life. Sophie was crying. Happy tears this time. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed in the conservatory surrounded by orchids, the same place where William had first offered her an impossible deal, where she had accepted because she had no other choice. But now they were choosing each other, freely, honestly, with full knowledge of the costs and the benefits and the beautiful, complicated mess that love always is. Over the next 2 months, Sophie finished her degree, passed her licensing exam on the first try, became a registered nurse, got a job at a community health clinic 3 days a week, spent the other 2 days running the foundation, built a life that was hers while sharing a life with William. William continued his recovery, got stronger, started advising Diana at the company again, played piano every morning, tended his orchids, learned slowly to let Sophie have her independence without feeling like he was losing her. Eleanor's cancer went into remission, full remission. Dr. Kim used the word miracle. Eleanor said it was stubbornness, refusing to die because her daughter needed her. Whatever the reason, she was alive, healthy, able to dance at Sophie's second wedding. Diana planned the ceremony. Not a big affair, just family and close friends, in the botanical gardens, in Catherine's memorial rose garden, with her mother's blessing in the form of flowers blooming all around them. Maya was Sophie's maid of honor. Diana stood up for William. Eleanor sat in the front row crying. Mrs. Chen made the cake. James and Sarah were there, the foundation staff, the nurses who had helped with William's recovery, the small circle of people who had supported them through everything. The vows were simple, honest. William promised to love Sophie with his whole heart for whatever time he had, to support her dreams, to let her be herself even when it scared him, to choose her every day not because of obligation, but because of joy. Sophie promised to love William fiercely, to stand beside him through health struggles and public judgment, to build a life alongside him without disappearing into him, to choose him every day with full knowledge of what that choice meant. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was real, full of love and promise and hope. The applause from their guests echoed through the garden, a celebration not just of a wedding, but of survival, of choosing love despite everything, of becoming family in the truest sense. At the reception, Diana gave a toast, raised her glass with tears in her eyes. For years, I thought my father was incapable of real connection, that he had closed himself off completely after Mom died. Then Sophie walked into his life and proved me wrong. She didn't fix him. She challenged him, made him uncomfortable, forced him to be human again. That's not just love, that's grace. So here's to Sophie and William, to second chances, to chosen family, to love that refuses to quit even when the world says it should. Everyone drank. Eleanor gave a toast about stubborn daughters and the men brave enough to love them. Mrs. Chen toasted to orchids that bloom in unexpected places. Maya toasted to hope and survival and never giving up. When it was William's turn, he stood slowly, still not quite steady on his feet, but stronger every day, looked at Sophie with everything he felt written on his face. I've given a lot of speeches in my life, business presentations, board meetings, formal events, but I've never been very good at saying what matters, so I'll keep this simple. Sophie, you saved my life, not by marrying me, not by nursing me through surgery, but by seeing me, really seeing me, and loving what you saw anyway. That's a gift I don't deserve, but will spend every remaining day trying to be worthy of. I love you, not because I paid you, not because we signed a contract, but because you're you, and I'm the luckiest man alive to have found you. There was not a dry eye in the garden. Sophie stood, crossed to William, held his face in her hands and kissed him while everyone cheered. Later, as the sun set and the party wound down, Sophie and William stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong, steady, alive. "We made it," she said softly. "Against all odds, we made it." "We did." William pulled her closer. "And we'll keep making it, one day at a time. For better or worse." For better or worse, through all of it, William kissed the top of her head. "I choose you. Every day, for as long as I get. And I choose you." Sophie closed her eyes, felt the weight of the stethoscope pendant against her chest, felt the weight of William's grandmother's ring on her finger, felt the weight of love that had started as transaction and become transformation. It's enough. This, us, it's more than enough. Around them, the garden settled into evening quiet. The roses Catherine had loved bloomed in the gathering dusk. The fountain whispered its endless song. And two people who had come together out of desperation stood wrapped in each other, choosing love, choosing life, choosing the hard, beautiful work of building something real from broken pieces. The year that was supposed to end in separation had become the year that changed everything. Sophie was no longer the desperate girl who had signed a contract. William was no longer the lonely man slowly dying in a museum. They were partners, lovers, best friends, family. Whatever time they had left, they would face it together. And that made all the difference. That made everything worth it. That made them whole. In the distance, the lights of Austin began to sparkle. The city they both loved, the place where a poor nursing student and a reclusive billionaire had collided, had saved each other, had built something neither could have imagined. The story was not over. Life never is. There would be more challenges, more struggles. William's health would decline eventually. They would face loss and grief and all the hard parts that come with loving someone. But they would face it together. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the contract, not the money, not the scandal, or the judgment, or the impossible circumstances. Just two people choosing each other, every single day, for as long as they had. That was love, real, complicated, imperfect, beautiful. That was everything. 6 months after the second wedding, Sophie Carter Ashford had built a life that was both hers and theirs. 3 days a week, she worked at the East Austin Community Health Clinic, saw patients who could not afford private doctors, treated diabetes and hypertension, and the thousand small ailments that plague people living paycheck to paycheck. She was good at it, better than good. Patients asked for her by name, trusted her because she understood what it meant to be desperate and poor, and one emergency away from catastrophe. 2 days a week, she ran Catherine's Legacy Foundation. They had grown beyond anything Sophie had imagined. 500 families helped in the first year. Medical debts totaling $3.2 million erased. Children getting surgeries they needed. Elderly people affording medications that kept them alive. Real, tangible difference. The kind that made the scandal and judgment worth enduring. Evenings belonged to William. They had dinner together every night. Sometimes at home with Mrs. Chen's cooking, sometimes at small restaurants where nobody recognized them or cared about their age difference. They talked about everything and nothing, about the patients Sophie had seen, about Diana's latest triumph at the company, about the orchids blooming in the conservatory, about life and death and the space between. William was stronger than he had been right after surgery, could walk the estate grounds without becoming winded, could play piano for an hour without his hands cramping, could make love to his wife without worrying his heart would give out. But he was not well, would never be well again. They both knew it. The surgery had bought time, not a cure, just time. Eleanor had been cancer-free for 8 months. 8 months of clean scans and declining tumor markers, and Dr. Kim using words like miraculous recovery. She had moved into a small house near the estate, close enough to visit, but far enough to maintain independence. She volunteered at the foundation twice a week, answered phones, comforted families waiting for news, gave them hope because she was living proof that sometimes, against all odds, you survive. Diana and Sarah had gotten married in a small ceremony in their Brooklyn apartment. Sophie and William had flown up for it, watched Diana glow with happiness as she said vows to the woman she loved. The four of them had become family in the truest sense. Weekly video calls, holiday visits, the easy intimacy of people who had chosen each other without obligation. Life was good. Not perfect. Nothing ever is. But good in the ways that matter, stable, loving, full of purpose. Sophie woke up most mornings feeling grateful, feeling like she had made the right choice, even though it had been the hardest one. But she also woke up knowing that William was dying. Slowly, inevitably. His heart was a ticking clock counting down to an ending neither of them wanted, but both had accepted. The question was not if, only when. They talked about it one evening in late spring, sitting on the back patio, watching the sun set over the hill country. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, beautiful in the way that Texas sunsets are, big, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. I need to tell you what I want, William said quietly. When the time comes, when my heart starts failing again. I don't want heroic measures. Sophie's chest tightened. She had known this conversation was coming, had been dreading it. Okay, tell me. No more surgeries, no ICU, no machines keeping me alive when there's no quality of life left. William took her hand. I want to die at home, in our bed, with you beside me, peacefully, not fighting for one more day in a hospital. DNR order? Yes, and hospice when the time comes. Comfort care only. William looked at her. Really looked. I know this is hard to hear, but I need to know you understand, that you'll respect this choice even if it hurts. Sophie wanted to argue, to say they should fight until the very end, to insist that every day was worth fighting for. But she thought about her father, about watching him die hooked to machines that prolonged suffering without offering hope, about the indignity of it, the pain. She would not do that to William. I understand, she said, voice steady despite the tears. I hate it, but I understand. Thank you. William pulled her close, kissed her temple. You've given me more than I deserved. More happiness in 2 years than I had in the previous 15. I don't want to waste our remaining time fighting the inevitable. How much time do you think we have? Dr. Torres says a year, maybe 2 if I'm lucky. Maybe less if I'm not. William's voice was calm, accepting. I want to use whatever time I have well, living instead of just surviving. They sat in silence as the sun finished setting, as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Sophie memorized the moment, the feel of William's hand in hers, the sound of his breathing, the weight of his presence. She would need these memories, would cling to them when he was gone. Over the next months, they lived with intention, made plans, created memories, built legacy. William started writing a memoir, not about business success or wealth accumulation, about love and loss and learning too late what actually matters, about Catherine and the years of grief, about Sophie and unexpected second chances, about being 73 and discovering you still have things to learn. He wrote in the mornings, his handwriting shakier than it used to be, but still readable. Sophie would find him in the study, surrounded by old photos and journals, face contemplative, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, always remembering. What are you working on today? She would ask. The chapter about meeting you. William would look up, still amazed after all this time. The night you showed up at the estate, desperate and terrified and trying so hard to seem brave. I knew then you were special. Took me longer to realize I was falling in love. Sophie would read the pages later, would see herself through his eyes, not the gold digger the world saw, but a woman making impossible choices with courage and integrity, a woman who had saved him by demanding he be human. It was humbling, seeing how he perceived her, how much he valued her beyond the transaction that brought them together. The memoir grew, chapter by chapter, a record of a life fully lived even if lived imperfectly. William wrote about business mistakes and personal failures, about missing Diana's childhood, about the regret that haunted him, but also about redemption, about Diana's forgiveness, about Eleanor accepting him as family, about Mrs. Chen's quiet loyalty, about building something that mattered more than money. The working title was The Contract That Changed Everything. Sophie had laughed when he told her. 2 on the nose? Perfectly on the nose, own it. They established scholarships in Catherine's name at Juilliard, full rides for talented musicians from low-income families, students who might otherwise never get the chance to pursue their art. The first recipient was a 17-year-old from South Dallas, piano prodigy, brilliant, poor. William and Sophie attended her acceptance recital, watched her play Chopin with skill and passion that would have made Catherine proud. This is her legacy, William whispered during the performance. Not the money I made, not the company I built. This, beauty and talent nurtured because we could. The estate gardens were open to the public twice a month, free admission. Families came from all over Austin. Children ran through the paths. Elderly couples sat on benches holding hands. People found peace in the carefully tended beauty. Mrs. Chen gave tours, told stories about Catherine's love of roses, about William's obsession with orchids, about the healing power of growing things. Sophie established a community health program through the foundation. Mobile clinics that went directly into underserved neighborhoods, brought healthcare to people who could not get to doctors, preventive care, vaccinations, chronic disease management, real public health work, the kind that saved lives before emergencies happened. James ran the program, was brilliant at it, made connections with community leaders, built trust, created infrastructure that would outlast all of them. He and Sophie worked well together, professional, respectful, focused on the mission rather than the past questions about their relationship. 1 year after the second wedding, the foundation hosted its first anniversary gala. Not the stiff formal affairs William used to attend. This was a celebration, held at the estate, open to everyone they had helped, families whose medical debts had been erased, patients who had gotten life-saving treatment, community members who had benefited from the mobile clinics. Over 1,000 people came, the gardens filled with laughter and music and joy. Children played on the lawns, adults shared stories, testimonials about what the foundation had meant. A single mother whose son had gotten heart surgery, an elderly man whose diabetes medication was now affordable, a young woman who had delivered a healthy baby because of prenatal care she could not have accessed otherwise. Sophie stood at the front, gave a speech, told them about being desperate 2 years ago, about not being able to afford her mother's treatment, about the choice she had made and where it had led, about how being helped changed you, made you want to help others, made you understand that we all need each other to survive. 2 years ago I was drowning, she said. Someone threw me a lifeline, not out of charity, out of mutual need. We saved each other. And then we decided to use what we had to save others. That's what this foundation is. That's what community is. People helping people. Not because we're saints, because we're human. And humans survive by taking care of each other. The applause was thunderous. William watched from the side, too tired to stand for long speeches but present, always present. Diana stood beside him, held his arm, both of them proud, both of them emotional. After the speeches there was dancing. A local band played. Not fancy, just good music. William asked Sophie to dance. They moved slowly across the makeshift dance floor, her head on his shoulder, his arms around her, swaying more than dancing. But it did not matter. This was not about performance, just about being together. I love you, he said into her hair, in case I forget to say it tomorrow, in case there are no more tomorrows. I love you more than I knew was possible. I love you too. Sophie held him tighter. And we'll have tomorrow, and the day after. As many days as we get. But even as she said it, she could feel him getting weaker, could feel the tremble in his hands, the slight wheeze in his breathing, the way he had to lean on her more than usual. Time was running out. They both knew it. 3 months later, William collapsed in the conservatory. Sophie was at work. Mrs. Chen found him unconscious among the orchids, called 911, called Diana, called Sophie. Sophie left the clinic mid-shift, drove to the hospital with her heart in her throat, found William in the ICU, awake but weak, wires and monitors everywhere. Dr. Torres looking grave. The valve is failing again, Dr. Torres explained. Faster than we expected. We can try another surgery. But at his age, with his overall heart function, the odds are not good. Maybe 30% survival. And even if he survives, his quality of life will be significantly diminished. Or, Sophie asked, voice steady despite the terror. Or we make him comfortable. Hospice care. Focus on quality time rather than prolonging the inevitable. Sophie looked at William. He was watching her, calm despite everything. He had already made his choice. She could see it in his eyes. This was the moment they had talked about, the moment when fighting stopped making sense. What do you want? She asked him. To go home. William's voice was weak, but certain. To spend whatever time I have left actually living, not in a hospital, not fighting. Just being with you. Sophie turned to Dr. Torres. How long? Without intervention, maybe 6 months. Maybe more. Maybe less. We'll set up hospice. Keep him comfortable. Manage pain. But no heroic measures. 6 months. Sophie felt the number settle into her bones. Not enough. Would never be enough. But more than some people got. More than Catherine had gotten. More than Sophie's father. 6 months to say goodbye. 6 months to make peace. 6 months to love him while he was still here. They brought William home 2 days later. Set up a hospital bed in their bedroom. Installed equipment for comfort care. Oxygen. Pain medication. Everything needed to keep him comfortable without prolonging suffering. The hospice nurse was a woman named Patricia, 60-something. Kind eyes. She had done this 1,000 times, knew how to be present without being intrusive, how to support without taking over. She came twice a week, checked vitals, adjusted medications, taught Sophie how to manage care. You're doing great, Patricia told Sophie after the first week. Most families struggle with this. But you're a natural. I'm a nurse. This is what I'm trained for. Training helps, but this is different. This is someone you love. That makes it harder. Patricia squeezed Sophie's shoulder. Make sure you're taking care of yourself too. Caregiving can consume you if you let it. Sophie tried, really tried. but it was hard not to be consumed, hard not to spend every moment watching William, listening for changes in breathing, anticipating needs before he had to ask. She cut back to 1 day a week at the clinic, put the foundation in James's capable hands, focused on the only thing that mattered, being present. Diana visited every day, would sit with William for hours, talk about the company, ask his advice, show him financial reports he could barely focus on anymore. But it was not about the information. It was about connection, about showing him he was still needed, still valued, still her father. Eleanor came twice a week, brought flowers from her garden, sat beside William's bed and talked about Sophie, about how proud she was, about how William had saved her daughter's life by giving Sophie purpose, by loving her well, by teaching her that choosing love was always worth it even when it cost everything. Sarah and Diana flew down every weekend, brought laughter and normalcy, told stories about their life in New York, about the brownstone they were renovating, about the adoption process they had started. William would never meet his grandchildren. They all knew it. But he could imagine them, could know that his daughter would build the family he had failed to maintain. Mrs. Chen cooked William's favorite meals even though he could barely eat, brought them on fine china, served them with care, sat with him while Sophie ran errands, told him stories about Catherine, about the early days, about love and loyalty and the families we build from choice rather than blood. Maya visited with updates from the diner where Sophie used to work, brought terrible coffee that William pretended to enjoy, made him laugh with stories about difficult customers and kitchen disasters, reminded him that the world was still turning, still full of ordinary life even as his own wound down. The days developed a rhythm. Mornings were best. William was strongest then, could sit up, could talk without too much effort, could even walk to the bathroom with assistance. Sophie would help him to the chair by the window. They would watch the sun rise over the gardens, drink coffee together, talk about whatever came to mind. "Remember when you first came here?" William said one morning. "You looked so terrified, so out of place." "I was terrified." Sophie smiled at the memory. "This house was like another planet. And you were this intimidating billionaire who wanted to marry me. I was a lonely old man making a desperate offer. You were exactly what I needed even though I didn't know it yet." "Sophie," William took her hand. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, don't stop living. Don't spend years grieving the way I did with Catherine. You're 24. You have a whole life ahead of you. Promise me you'll live it." I promised to try. Sophie could not promise more than that. Could not imagine life without him, even though she knew it was coming. Find someone else eventually. Someone your own age. Someone who can give you decades instead of months. William's voice was firm. "I want you to be happy. Really happy. Not just existing. You made me happy." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "You taught me what love looks like. How can I find that again?" "Because you know what to look for now. Because I taught you that you deserve real partnership, real respect, real love." William squeezed her hand. "Don't settle for less just because you had it once. Find it again." They sat in silence, watching the day begin, knowing days were numbered, but not knowing the exact count. That was the cruelty of dying, the uncertainty. You knew the end was coming, but not when. Had to live in constant awareness of mortality while trying not to be paralyzed by it. The memoir was finished in early December. William's handwriting had become illegible by then, so he dictated to Sophie. She typed while he talked, telling stories, sharing wisdom, leaving something behind. The last chapter was addressed directly to her, to Diana, to Eleanor, to everyone who had been part of his second chance at life. "I built an empire and lost everything that mattered," he dictated. "Then I was given a gift I didn't deserve. A young woman who saw past my wealth to the broken person underneath, who demanded I be better, who loved me not despite my flaws, but with full awareness of them. Sophie saved my life, not by agreeing to marry me, by refusing to let me hide from myself, by forcing me to be human again. That's what love does, real love. It doesn't fix you. It challenges you to fix yourself, to be worthy of the gift you've been given. If you're reading this, learn from my mistakes. Don't wait until you're dying to realize what matters. People matter. Connection matters. Love matters. Everything else is just noise. Choose wisely. Love fiercely. Show up. Be present. Don't waste time the way I did. There's never as much as you think. Sophie cried as she typed. William cried as he spoke. But when it was done, they both felt something settle. Peace, completion. The story told, the lessons recorded, the legacy preserved. Christmas came. Their last Christmas together, though, neither said it aloud. Diana and Sarah flew in. Eleanor came for dinner. Mrs. Chen cooked a feast. They ate in William's room, pulled chairs around the bed, made it a party despite the circumstances. They exchanged small gifts. Nothing expensive, just tokens. Sophie gave William a photo album, pictures from the past 2 years, the conservatory, the foundation gala, the second wedding, their life captured in images, proof it had been real. William gave Sophie a letter, not to be opened until after he was gone. She held it, felt the weight of it, put it in her dresser drawer for safekeeping. Diana gave them both framed photos of the grandson they would never meet, ultrasound images. The adoption was proceeding, a baby boy due in March. William would not live to see him, but he could know he existed, could imagine him, could feel hope for the future even as his own ended. That's my legacy, William said quietly, staring at the ultrasound. Not the money, not the company. That boy, raised by my daughter who learned from my mistakes, who will be present and loving in everything I failed to be. You weren't a failure, Diana's voice was fierce. You were human, you made mistakes and you owned them. That's not failure, that's courage. After everyone left, Sophie helped William into bed, tucked him in like he was precious. Because he was. Every moment with him was precious now. Every breath counted. I'm tired, he said. Not sleepy tired, just tired. I know. Sophie lay down beside him carefully, held his hand. Do you want your pain medication? Not yet. Want to stay clear for a little longer. Want to feel this. Being here with you. Being alive. They lay in the dark listening to each other breathe. The oxygen machine hummed quietly. Outside the window, the estate was lit for Christmas. Lights twinkling in the trees, beautiful and temporary, like everything. Sophie, William said into the darkness. Thank you. For all of it, for saying yes, for staying, for loving me, for making my last years my best years. Thank you for seeing me, for believing I was worth more than my circumstances, for teaching me that I deserved real love. Sophie's voice broke. For being exactly who I needed when I needed it most. We saved each other. We did, the best trade I ever made. William laughed, weak but real. Best trade I ever made too, and I've made some good trades in my time. They fell asleep like that, holding hands, together, the way they had been for 2 years, the way they would be until the end. January was hard. William weakened significantly, could no longer get out of bed without help, could barely eat, slept most of the day, but when he was awake, he was present, clear, himself. Patricia, the hospice nurse, warned Sophie it would not be much longer. Weeks at most. Sophie called Diana, called Eleanor, called everyone who needed to say goodbye. They came, sat with William, talked or sat in silence, said the things that needed saying, made peace, let go. Mrs. Chen brought orchids from the conservatory, put them on the nightstand where William could see them, whispered to him in Cantonese, prayers or blessings or just comfort. Sophie did not ask. Some things were private, sacred. James came, thanked William for the foundation, for the chance to do work that mattered, promised to keep it going, to honor the legacy. William nodded, satisfied. His work would continue. That was enough. Maya brought terrible coffee one last time, made William smile despite the pain, told him he had been good to her girl, had loved Sophie the way she deserved. That was all Maya needed to know, all that mattered. On a Tuesday morning in late January, William woke more alert than he had been in days. Asked Sophie to open the windows, let in fresh air. He wanted to see the gardens, wanted to feel alive. Sophie helped him sit up, arranged pillows, opened the windows despite the January cold, wrapped him in blankets, sat beside him watching the morning light paint the world gold. It's beautiful, William said. Voice barely a whisper. All of it. Life. This. You. You're beautiful. Sophie kissed his forehead. The love of my life. I love you so much. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. Don't forget me. Never. How could I? You changed everything. You changed me, made me better. William's eyes were closing, so tired, but happy. Ready. Rest. I'm right here, not going anywhere. I know, that's why I can rest. He fell asleep holding her hand. His breathing grew slower, shallower. Sophie knew, had seen enough death to recognize the signs. This was it. The moment she had dreaded. The moment she could not prevent. She called Diana, called Eleanor. They came quickly, gathered around the bed, held hands, held William, held each other. Patricia checked his vitals, gave him morphine for comfort, made sure he was not in pain, told them it would be soon, maybe hours, maybe less. Sophie lay down beside William one last time, held him, whispered all the things she needed him to know, that he was loved, that he had mattered, that his life had meant something, that she was grateful for every moment, every choice, every hard, beautiful minute they had shared. Diana held his other hand, told him about the baby, about plans for the nursery, about how she would tell his grandson about the grandfather who learned to love before it was too late. Eleanor sat at the foot of the bed, prayed quietly, thanked God or the universe or whoever might be listening for this man who had saved her daughter, who had saved them all in different ways. Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, whispering goodbye to the man she had served for 30 years, who had become family, who would leave a hole in the world when he left it. William's breathing changed, became irregular, stopped, started, stopped again. Sophie felt his hand go slack in hers, felt the moment his spirit left, felt the absence, the terrible finality of it. He's gone, Patricia said gently, checked for pulse, found none. He's at peace now. Sophie could not move, could not process, just lay there holding his body, still warm, still him, but empty. The essential William gone somewhere she could not follow. Diana was sobbing, Eleanor crying quietly. Mrs. Chen had left the room, could not watch the end. Too painful. Sophie finally sat up, looked at William's face, peaceful, no longer strained with pain or effort. Just quiet, still, done. Goodbye, my love, she whispered. Thank you for everything. I'll miss you every day, every single day. The funeral was held in the Botanical Gardens, in Catherine's memorial Rose Garden, where William had proposed the second time, where they had gotten married again, where it had all come full circle. Hundreds of people came, business associates, foundation families, community members, people whose lives William had touched directly or indirectly. The garden overflowed, had to set up speakers so everyone could hear. Sophie gave the eulogy, stood at the front in a simple black dress, looked out at all these people who had known different versions of William, who had seen different facets of a complicated man. William Ashford was not perfect, she began, voice steady through sheer force of will. He made mistakes. He prioritized work over family for too long. He missed important moments. He learned lessons too late. But he learned them. That's what matters. He grew. He changed. He became the man his wife had believed he could be, the father his daughter deserved, the partner I needed. He did not waste his second chance. He seized it, lived fully, loved completely, left the world better than he found it. She talked about the foundation, about the 500 families helped, about the scholarships and the gardens and the memoir that would be published next month, about legacy measured not in dollars but in lives changed, in love given, in growth achieved. She talked about loving him, about the unexpected gift of finding your person in the least likely place, about choosing love even when the world said it made no sense, about the courage required to be vulnerable, to risk everything for connection. I had 2 years with William, she said, voice breaking now. 2 years out of my whole life. But they were the most important 2 years. They shaped who I am, taught me what I'm capable of, showed me that love is always worth the risk, always worth the pain, always worth everything. She read the final passage from his memoir, the one addressed to everyone, the one about not wasting time, choosing wisely, loving fiercely, showing up. When she finished, there was not a dry eye in the garden. Diana stood, hugged Sophie, whispered thank you for saving him, for loving him, for giving me my father back before it was too late. The reception was at the estate, people everywhere, sharing stories, celebrating a life. Sophie moved through it in a fog, accepting condolences, hearing anecdotes, learning about versions of William she had never met. But eventually everyone left, the house emptied, and Sophie was alone for the first time since William died. Alone in the massive estate that had once felt like a cage and had become a home. She walked to the bedroom they had shared, sat on the edge of the bed, still unmade from that last morning. His pillow still held the indent of his head. The room still smelled faintly of him, cologne and orchids and something essentially William. She found the letter he had given her at Christmas, opened it with shaking hands. "My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope my passing was peaceful. I hope you were there. I hope I told you I loved you one more time. But just in case, I'm telling you now. I love you. More than I thought possible. More than I knew how to express when I was alive. You were my miracle, my second chance, my proof that it's never too late to get it right. Now comes the hard part. Living without me. I know you're hurting. I know the grief feels overwhelming, but I need you to remember something. You're 24 years old. You have 6 decades ahead of you. Don't spend the mourning. Don't make my mistake of letting grief consume you. I spent 15 years as a ghost after Catherine died. Don't do that. Live. Really live. Finish your career. Grow the foundation. Fall in love again when you're ready. Build a family if you want one. Become the woman you were meant to be. The foundation is yours. Run it however you see fit. The cottage is yours too. Diana agreed. It's your home as long as you want it. But don't feel obligated to stay at the estate if it's too painful. Go wherever you need to go to heal. My memoir will be published in March. Proceeds go to the foundation. Use them to help more people, to build the programs you've dreamed about, to change lives the way you changed mine. And Sophie, one more thing. In my study, top drawer of the desk, there's another envelope. For you. From Catherine. I found it years ago in her things. Never had the courage to open it. But I think she meant it for whoever came after her, for the person who would love me next. Read it when you're ready. Not now. Later. When the grief is less sharp. When you can see forward instead of just backward. Thank you for 2 perfect years. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me well. I'll carry that love wherever I go next. And I'll be watching, hoping you find happiness, hoping you build the life you deserve. All my love, always and forever, William. Sophie read the letter 3 times, then held it to her chest and finally, let herself break completely. Sobbed for everything lost, for the future stolen, for the man she would never see grow old, for the life they would never build. Mrs. Chen found her hours later, still sitting on the bed, still holding the letter, gently took Sophie's hand, led her to the guest room, tucked her in like a child, sat beside her until she fell asleep. The next months were a blur. Sophie went through the motions, worked at the clinic, managed the foundation, attended to all the business of death, lawyers and accountants, and decisions about what to do with a fortune she had never wanted and now could not give back. Diana handled most of it, made decisions, protected Sophie from the worst of it. The will was straightforward. The company to Diana. The estate and grounds to be maintained as public gardens. The cottage to Sophie. And money. So much money. More than Sophie could spend in 10 lifetimes. All of it designated for the foundation, for helping people, for continuing the work. The memoir was published in March, became an instant bestseller. People connected with the honesty, the vulnerability, the story of a man who learned too late but still learned, who found love the second time and did not waste it. Reviews were glowing, sales phenomenal, every dollar of profit going to the foundation. Sophie did not read it, could not yet, would someday, but not now, too fresh, too raw. Eleanor moved into the cottage with Sophie for a while, made sure she ate, made sure she got out of bed, made sure she kept living, even when living felt impossible. Slowly, Sophie began to heal. The grief did not disappear, but it became bearable, became something she could carry while still moving forward. 6 months after William's death, Sophie went back to work full-time, threw herself into the foundation, expanded it, opened offices in Houston and Dallas and San Antonio, then in other states, Arizona, New Mexico, Louisiana, anywhere people needed help, anywhere the healthcare system failed the vulnerable. Within 3 years, Catherine's Legacy Foundation operated in 5 states, had helped over 2,000 families, had erased tens of millions in medical debt, had saved lives, changed lives, made real, measurable difference. Sophie hired staff, built infrastructure, created sustainability, made sure the work would continue long after she was gone, made sure William's legacy and Catherine's memory would live on through healing and hope. She dated occasionally, nothing serious, nice men who could not compare to the impossible standard William had set. Men who were appropriate, age appropriate, background appropriate, boring. She stopped trying after a while, decided she was content alone, content with work and purpose and the family she had built. Diana's son was named William, Will for short. Sophie was named godmother, flew to New York for the christening, held the baby and felt both joy and grief. This was the grandson William would never meet, the legacy he would never see, but he had known he was coming, had died with hope for the future. That counted for something. 1 year after William's death, Sophie finally opened Catherine's letter, the one from the study drawer, sat in the cottage on a quiet Sunday afternoon, broke the seal. "To whoever comes after me," the letter began. "I'm writing this because I know William. I know when I'm gone, he'll bury himself in grief. We'll close off. We'll stop living. And I hate that. Because he deserves love, deserves happiness, deserves a life beyond mourning. So if you're reading this, thank you. Thank you for seeing past his walls. Thank you for being patient with his grief. Thank you for loving him despite everything. I know it's not easy. William is complicated, stubborn, difficult. But beneath all that is a man capable of profound love, a man who will give you everything if you let him. I hope you let him. I hope you build a life together. I hope you make him laugh, make him remember how to play piano for joy instead of just grief. Make him human again. He needs that, deserves that. And so do you. Don't let him hide behind work, behind money, behind the walls he builds. Demand his whole heart. He'll resist, but he'll give it if you push, and when he does, treasure it. Because his love is rare, real, worth everything. I'm trusting you with him, with the man I loved most in the world. Take care of him, love him well, and know that wherever I am, I'm grateful. Grateful he found someone. Grateful he's not alone. Grateful he gets to love again. With all my blessings, Catherine." Sophie cried reading it. But they were different tears. Not just grief, also gratitude, also connection. Catherine had given her blessing, had wanted this, had hoped for exactly what happened. That knowledge settled something in Sophie's chest, made her feel less like an interloper, more like part of a continuum, part of a legacy of love. She framed the letter, put it on her nightstand beside the photo of her and William from their second wedding. 2 women who had loved the same difficult man. 2 women connected across time by grace and generosity and hope. Life continued. Eleanor stayed cancer-free, moved into a condo downtown, volunteered at the foundation 3 days a week, became an advocate, a voice for people fighting the same battles she had won. She and Sophie had dinner every Sunday, talked about everything, had become best friends in addition to mother and daughter. Diana visited twice a year, brought Will, let Sophie be the fun aunt, the one who spoiled him and sent him home on sugar highs. The chosen family knit closer by time and choice and loss survived together. Mrs. Chen retired at 80, moved into a small cottage on the estate grounds, tended the orchids, gave garden tours, told stories about Catherine and William and the love that had filled this place, became a living memorial, a keeper of stories, a reminder that love echoes beyond death. Maya and Sophie stayed close, met for coffee weekly, talked about life and work and the strange paths that led them here. Maya had started dating the cook from the diner, was happier than Sophie had ever seen her, proof that it was never too late, that love came when you stopped looking, when you were just living. 5 years after William's death, Sophie was 30, running a foundation that had helped over 10,000 families, working part-time at 3 different clinics, teaching community health at the university 1 semester a year, building exactly the life William had wanted for her, the life she had discovered she wanted for herself. She still wore William's grandmother's ring, still lived in the cottage, still visited the memorial garden twice a month. Not to grieve, just to talk, to update him, to feel connected to something larger than herself. One Tuesday afternoon, Sophie was at the East Austin clinic. A young woman came in, maybe 22, looked exhausted, defeated, asked to speak with someone about payment plans, could not afford her mother's cancer treatment, did not know what to do. Sophie sat down with her, listened to her story, heard echoes of her own desperation 5 years ago, saw herself in this young woman's eyes, the fear, the love, the impossible choice. "Tell me about your mother," Sophie said gently. The young woman talked. Sophie listened. And when the story was told, Sophie pulled out a card, Catherine's Legacy Foundation, handed it to the trembling girl. "We help families exactly like yours. No strings, no judgment, just help. Because someone helped me once when I needed it. And the only way to honor that gift is to pass it forward." The young woman stared at the card, started crying. How? Why? Because we all need help sometimes. Because healthcare should not be a privilege. Because your mother deserves treatment and you deserve not to choose between your future and her life. Sophie's voice was steady. "Certain. Call this number. Talk to James. He'll get your mother enrolled. She'll start treatment this week." "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by helping someone else someday. When you can. When you have the resources, pass it forward. That's all I ask." After the young woman left, Sophie sat alone in the exam room, felt William's presence, not literally, but in her choices, in her work, in the woman she had become because he had seen her potential when she could not see it herself. That evening, she walked to the memorial garden, sat on the bench with his name, looked at the inscription, William James Ashford, beloved father, husband, friend. He learned to live again. "I helped another family today," she said to the empty garden, to the memory of him, to whatever might be listening. A young woman like I was, desperate, scared, trying to save her mother. We're covering the treatment. She'll be okay. Her mother will be okay. The wind rustled through the roses. Might have been response. Might have been just wind. Sophie chose to believe it was William, approving, proud, at peace. "I miss you," she said quietly. "Every day, every moment. But I'm okay. I'm building the life you wanted for me, helping people, making a difference, living fully. You'd be proud of the foundation, of everything we've accomplished, of the lives we've saved." She sat in silence, watching the sunset, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples, Texas sunsets, still beautiful, still overwhelming, still impossible to ignore. "I loved you," Sophie said to the gathering dusk, to the man who had changed everything, to the memory that lived in her heart. "I still love you. I always will. Thank you for 2 perfect years. Thank you for teaching me what I was worth. Thank you for seeing me." The garden grew quiet. The last light faded. Stars began to appear. Sophie stood, touched the bench one last time, walked back to the cottage, back to her life, carrying grief and gratitude in equal measure, carrying love that death had not diminished, carrying forward because that was what he had asked, what she had promised. The year that changed everything was long over, but its echoes remained. In the foundation, in the families helped, in the love that continued to ripple outward, in the woman Sophie had become, in the legacy built from desperation and transformed into hope. She was not the desperate girl who had signed a contract anymore, was not the frightened wife trying to survive scandal and judgment. She was Sophie Carter Ashford, nurse, foundation director, advocate, woman who had loved deeply and lost painfully and survived anyway, woman who knew that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations, woman who understood that love is always worth it, even when it costs everything, especially then. In her journal that night, she wrote a final entry, the conclusion to a story 5 years in the making. Today, I helped a young woman save her mother, passed forward the gift William gave me, made his love tangible, made Catherine's legacy real, made meaning from loss. This is what it's all about. Not the grand gestures, not the dramatic moments. Just this. One person helping another. One story of redemption inspiring the next. One life saved creating ripples that save others. William, wherever you are, I hope you can see this. See what we built. See what your love created. See that you mattered. That your life meant something. That your second chance changed the world in small, essential ways. I miss you. I love you. And I'm living the life you dreamed for me. Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for 2 perfect years that taught me how to live the next 60. Until we meet again. With all my love, Sophie. She closed the journal, turned off the light, lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the estate settling around her. This house that had been a mausoleum, that had become a home, that was now a legacy, a place of healing and hope and second chances. Tomorrow she would wake up, would go to work, would help people, would continue the work, would live fully, intentionally, with purpose. But tonight, she let herself remember, let herself feel everything. The grief and the gratitude and the impossible love that had transformed a contract into a covenant, that had taken 2 broken people and made them whole. Outside her window, the garden slept, the orchids William had tended, the roses Catherine had loved, the grounds open to the public twice a month, all of it growing, changing, living, proof that beauty persists, that love echoes, that second chances are real. And in the memorial garden, on a bench between 2 names, the inscription caught moonlight. Catherine and William, reunited in memory, connected through Sophie, through the love that had refused to die, through the legacy that would outlive them all. The contract that changed everything had become the love that saved everyone. And that, Sophie thought, as she drifted toward sleep, was the whole point, the reason, the meaning of it all. Love, in all its messy, complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking glory. Always love. The end.